Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku's secret identity was Batman Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. So let's start the video. I've seen this before. I've looked up to see my mother and father there with me again. The sky above them a clouded blanket the color of wet ash, and the ground its dark reflection. Each step becomes a prayer for home as we walk, the path ahead fading away with the pale moonlight, until it becomes less real than the stormy night. I saw a glint of stainless steel, the only time a light in the dark wasn't comforting to a small child. The cold metal made grayer the skin of the hand that held it. The bullet is domed, shaped to fly fast. It's faster than the fearful flinch or the rapid blink of an eye that accompanies it. The noise reverberated in my ears and rang out far over the stone structures of Misutafu. I had once believed that masked heroes would swoop down to protect the innocent. In that moment, under the sickly yellow glow of a dying street lamp in the middle of a dark sidewalk, there was no caped crusader. Nobody came in response to the gunshot that was as loud as thunder, or to a child's wails that rained down like an ensuing monsoon. Nobody is ever here in this moment other than me. Nobody can say everything will be fine ever again. I huddled there on the wet pavement for a long time. Recovery Girl didn't come to save my mother and father. 𝗏𝗏 didn't rush to apprehend the criminal who shot them. 𝗵𝘃𝗁 wasn't there to comfort the now orphaned boy. All Might isn't here to do any of those things. My mother's hand had gone cold by the time I had heard the first siren. Yet, the little boy's heart had gone colder. I wake up faster than a cat dropped in iced water, every sense urging me to claw my way to standing. Above me is a whirling vortex of ornate purple, the dense fog flickering and licking at the turbulent air. It's a gateway to danger, and the danger is coming through. With an enormous burst of adrenaline, I thrust and roll myself off my bed and onto the hardwood floor. My eyes are open so wide that each iris is a perfect orb of hardened malachite, and their reflection is an iron beam impaling the place where I once was. The construction pillar continues coming through the spinning mass of darkness, like a train speeding out of a tunnel and down the rails. I have to simultaneously brace myself and shield my eyes from the strong pickup of dust that it creates on impact. My bed is reduced to splinters and tarnished fabric, its location in the room now replaced by the large hole that an iron beam is protruding from. There's a prickling sensation along the baseline of my bare back, putting my neck hairs on end and triggering an instinctive backwards leap. Behind me, a second portal of darkness warps in another construction beam. It misses me by a few centimeters, another close call. The metal extends across the entire room before shattering my room's only window and launching itself outside. I stick the landing, bare feet slapping against the ground. That last attack added to the air's mixture of moisture. Small specks of water nipped my back and joined the sweat there. It's not only the drop in temperature. I'd also caught a whiff of what smells like high tide. These construction pillars are coming from someplace like a dock or, perhaps, straight from beneath the depths of the ocean. It's awfully considerate, since that's how I was able to tell what direction they were coming from in order to react. No more time to think. There's a third iron beam plummeting from above me. I tuck and roll out of the way, narrowly dodging the incoming pillar. The house shakes when the metal crashes through the wood floor, but I don't lose my balance. This is 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐼's doing. I need to find him in order to stop the source of these warp gates. Whenever 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐼 produces a mass of his dark fog, it's capable of transporting anything that it comes in contact with to a location of his choosing or vice versa. The formidable quirk makes for a difficult challenge when first waking up in the morning. A combination of mildew's smell and feeling hits me before the realization of 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐼's fourth portal. Beneath me, I fall backwards, tripping into a handstand and then bouncing off the heels of my palms in order to redirect my position. A beam flies out from the ground portal and crashes into the ceiling as I stagger backwards into a full stand. I can't stay here testing my luck with avoiding these attacks. I need to keep moving if I'm to outmaneuver 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐼 as an opponent. My feet carry me towards the now open window, leaving the floor at the last possible second to avoid stepping on shards of glass, and I go flying outside in a vertical leap. The glare that the sun emits isn't as nearly as bad as the heat it gives off. Temporarily blinded, I resort to trusting my instincts and reach out to grab onto a loose brick in my home's siding. The abrupt drop with my weight suppressing it pulls the muscles in my arm and shoulder, the bone popping and nearly dislocating itself. I see through my teeth, ignoring the sharp pain that spikes within, and swing down onto the balcony of the lower level. Reflexively, I spin around at the sound of a blaring car horn. A warp gate much wider than the previous ones launches a vehicle straight towards me. I recognize the car as one of my own from the garage that houses hundreds. I just wish it wasn't the Ferrari. It's completely battered once it crashes into the balcony, metal grinding against stone, both breaking off into large chunks of each. I just barely managed to throw myself down in time. I had to lay flat on my stomach as it passed overhead. one of the tires slicing through a few green hairs on my head. It could have been worse. I'm without any padding or armor, leaving me vulnerable. All I have on are plaid green pajama bottoms and the underwear beneath, which doesn't offer very much protection. Even with the fine-toned 8-pack that came from intense physical condition, it wouldn't be enough to take a blunt hit from either the Ferrari or those construction beams from earlier. The numerous scars, bruises, scrapes, and burns that cover my exposed body is enough proof of that. I shove myself off the ground, pushing up and moving forward again. Above me is a second portal, varying objects raining down from the source of transportation. Bricks crack in half, hitting the place where I once was. Rocks dent the roof of the already damaged Ferrari. Pebbles chip the balcony's cement. I'm being navigated by the falling objects. 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐳 is controlling the direction that I'm running in. Ahead of me, a familiar purple vortex sucks up the wind as it begins to expand. Anticipating something is about to come out of it that I need to avoid, I bend my knees before pushing off with my calf muscles to jump skyward. Below me, dozens of wooden crates and cardboard boxes topple out of the warp gate, scattering across the ground. I leap directly over the pile of cargo and slide along the ground like a baseball player stealing first base. I wind my extended leg back around to redirect my positioning. Once I'm facing the manor again, I break into a sprint for the damaged balcony. Using deductive reasoning, 𝗂𝐻𝐲 must be at the center of the bottom floor. I didn't think he would risk being out in the open, but now that hypothesis has some evidence to support it. The Ferrari, cargo, and rocks were meant to steer me away from the manor. He wouldn't be too close for capture on the second floor when he first attacked either. That leaves one location, the bottom floor. A gust of cold air underlined with the smell of a high tide alerts me of what's likely to be more construction beams being launched. The small whirling blotches of purple spit out iron beams as predicted, each of them positioned in front of windows to prevent me from entering the building. There's one way in that he's leaving out. I dive for the crashed Ferrari, the backseat capable of being pulled off its hinges so that I can climb in and out the other side. The door swings off and topples over without much effort. Beams crash against the ground behind me, creating craters as they clang there. In the foyer is 𝗂𝐻𝐲, just as predicted. He's covered in the same smog as his warp gates, save for the narrow yellow slants that serve as his eyes, the faint glow from them being the only indication of where they might be looking. The metal brace that covers his collarbone is the only glimpse at a physical body he may have beneath the purple smoke. If I'm going to exploit a weakness, that will be it. Above me, a warp gate approximately the same size as the one that hurled a vehicle at me begins to open. There's no moisture in the air nor any odor that may give me a clue as to what will come out of it. I can't decipher whether I should duck or dodge and what direction to go in. There's only one option left then. I jump towards the warp gate, prepared to confront whatever comes through it head on. Another thing that I recognize as one of my own comes barreling towards me. It's my piano from the study 2 rooms down the hall from the kitchen. I climb on top of it while it's still airborne, and begin riding it down like a surfboard. The keys make an ear-piercing noise once it collides with the floor, and the piano itself begins to flip over from its velocity. I go along with its flip and perform one of my own, going aerial for a second time. I pay no mind to the second crash behind me as I touch back down on the floor's surface. Suddenly, that surface begins seeping in on itself. The once rough hardened boards soften like I'm now standing on a mattress cushion. The floor twists in one direction, the spiraling motion expanding into a vortex that makes me realize 𝗂𝐻𝐲 has created a warp gate directly beneath my feet. My reflexes kick in and I spring off the ground before it can fully form, luck being the only reason why I didn't fall through. I land on my wounded shoulder, completing the job that I started earlier and fully dislocating it now. All I can do is grunt and roll my body so that the pressure of my own weight doesn't make it any worse. There's no time to put the bone back in place. I use my other arm to get back up by pushing off the ground with my elbow. Then, I make a mad dash for 𝗂𝐻𝐲 with that same arm extended in the hopes that it can reach him. My open palm never reaches the man made of mist. Expanding in front of me is a warp gate big enough to match my height. There's no slowing my momentum down. There's no brakes that I can put on to stop myself from entering the looming mass of purple. It's no rabbit hole. It's a void. There's no air pushing against my face, which means I'm not falling. I'm merely suspended in place. The darkness pulls in, swallowing me whole, and there's nothing I can do to stop it as I hover in what feels like a severe storm cloud. I know that the entry to this vacuity has closed behind me. Yet, what's in front of me and below me is nothing better. I look down and see a deep dark abyss that's staring back. The darkness reaches out for me, its hands trying to wrap around me so that I can be pulled down. It's fighting its own stubbornness of keeping me motionless. The void is beckoning for me to drop. As I fall forward, I round the shoulder that's still intact and twist my body, planning to roll once I hit the floor. I plan to immediately bounce off the heels of my feet and return standing. There's just one problem. There is no floor. Instead, I find myself plunging into freezing chlorinated water, a pool. My mind rationalizes. I need to remain calm and force my stinging eyes to remain open in order to assess my surroundings. It's no good. All I can see are swirling silver bubbles. There's no bottom that I can reach with my kicking feet either. It doesn't help that my breath was knocked out by the unexpected rush of water. The lack of oxygen is making it difficult to think clearly. I had exhaled all of the air from my lungs in preparation for impact with a floor that wasn't there. My heart is slamming inside my chest. All of this exertion burning up my limited oxygen supply. I need to breathe, and soon. I have no choice but to risk breaking the surface. There's no sense of direction. There's no telling up from down. I just pray that I'm headed towards one of the closer sides of the pool and not the far shallow end. My dislocated shoulder works against me, dragging me back, but it doesn't stop me from propelling through the water either. Eventually, my luck holds out and my hand hits an edge. I greedily inhale the air back into my aching lungs once the water splashes away from my nose and mouth. My eyes still burn from the chlorine and my ears feel clogged, limiting the senses that would be alerting me of 𝐒𝐸𝐽's next attack. I shouldn't call it quits, but there's no use trying to argue when the only thing leaving my throat right now is a mix between choking and gagging on water. All I can do to show my fighting spirit still remains is drag my own dripping body out of the pool. 𝗂𝐸𝐽 stands over my hunched position, waiting for me. For a moment, I expect him to attack me again. I hate to admit my relief when I see that the mist surrounding his body beneath the neck brace is starting to dissipate. Beneath the smog, he's wearing an elegant suit, opting for a waistcoat instead of a jacket. He holds out a white towel for me to take and dry off with. Thanks. I accept the offering and drape it over the mess of hair that's clinging to my forehead. I'll use it to dry off after I fix my shoulder. First, I grab the wrist of my injured arm. Next, I guide the ball of my arm's bone back to the shoulder socket by holding it straight. My rotator cuff is torn. All that's left to do is finally fix it. I grit my teeth and pop it back into position. You performed quite adequately this time. Wouldn't you agree, Master Midoriya? 𝗂𝐸𝐽 patiently waits for me to scrub at the damp curls on my head. I make him wait before answering, I've done better. Because it's true and I'm not satisfied with the training session like he is. Not only did I fail to subdue him, but he had made it easy on me by holding back. And I told you to call me Izuku. I added as more than an afterthought. It bothers me that 𝗂𝐸𝐽 acts like a mindless drone sometimes, as though he only exists to serve whoever he deems his master. My father's will had made 𝗂𝐸𝐽 my caretaker in the event that something were to ever happen to him. 𝗂𝐸𝐽 now serves as a butler of sorts, obeying my orders and providing me with assistance. I don't want to treat him like that's all he is though. He'll never replace my father, but he did help raise me after my parents died. On occasion, I might. And his snarky behavior is mildly assuring that he may feel a similar way. I want to keep it that way, so I snark back. It's going to be difficult falling back asleep since you dumped me into the pool. It doesn't help that my pajamas are still damp. The water is cold, you know. Perhaps I shall drop you into a volcano the next time. I can't help but smirk at his quip and wind up having to hide it by scrubbing at my face with the towel I was given. Would you prefer that I deposit you on the sun? There would surely be no returning from that. Yeah, you've made your point. I toss the towel back to 𝗂𝐸𝐽 once I'm finished using it to dry off and make my way across the pool patio to go back inside the manor. Could you warp me a tray of this day's poisons? I know that I don't need to wait for an answer or look behind myself for affirmation. In the spare bedroom, please. We'll have to hire some contractors to repair mine. Of course, I shall tidy up some of the mess and begin preparing a meal adequate for maintaining your physique to serve once you wake up again. 𝗂𝐸𝐽's voice grows faint as I enter the manor and leave him outside. It's fine. I don't need to hear his assurances. I know he does his job and he does it well. Proof being completely evident, I find a tray with 4 syringes placed by the nightstand in the spare bedroom as requested. Each one contains a variety of poisons, venoms, and toxins just below a lethal dosage. It's a way for my body to create antibodies and build an immunity towards them. I've been injecting myself with these for years now that I could probably empathize with diabetes patients. The needle is always sharp, but the puncture is a brief prick that reminds me of a thorn that gets stuck in your flesh. The skinny piece of metal makes its presence known, deep within the muscle of my upper arm. My blood boils when it mixes with a new insistent liquid present. Then, I'm less concerned with the needle stuck in my arm and more concentrated on the effects of what was inside it. It can take less than a minute or longer than a few hours for the symptoms to make themselves known. There's no rhyme or reason to whether I'm injecting myself with a fast-acting poison or if it's going to be a venom that takes its time coursing through my system. Sometimes I can feel it in my veins. But it's more often than not the recurring side effects that help me decipher what it is I'll be sleeping off. Regardless, it's always after I've already been hit by a wave of nausea that the realization settles in. A fever followed by a cold sweat that makes my movements sluggish. Breaths too shallow to be normal. This isn't as bad as some of the others I've experienced. When my eyelids become heavy, I don't resist them closing. I embrace the nightmare that's waiting for me. It reminds me of why I do this, why I train so hard. It's so that no other child has to experience that night ever again. It's so that I can be the hero who comes every night from now on. Through the soles of my shoes, I can feel them, the beating of 1,000 wings, just below the ground. It reminds me of that night in the alley, how I felt, how my thoughts were, frantic, screeching, untamed, circling in pitch-black darkness. Yes, father, mother, I shall become a bat. I'm reminded that I'm not alone when I hear Kurogiri clearing his throat. Slowly, I regain awareness of the present time and where I am. In front of me are the 2 headstones that belong to my mother and father. In my hand is a bouquet of flowers, the numbness in that hand making it easy to let go of. That's right, I'm visiting their graves at the cemetery. We must be going now. It wouldn't bode well for your public image to be late. Kurogiri speaks in the same soft tone that he did that night long ago. He's treating me like I'm still the child that was lost and confused after what had occurred. To some extent, for a moment there, it felt like I was. Now though, my mind has regained awareness of the present. I can't suppress a heavy sigh when I remember what Kurogiri is talking about. It's not something that I'm looking forward to. Today is the unveiling of a museum dedicated to All Might, and I'm required to attend considering I'm a sponsor for it along with my company assisting in its funding for being built in the first place. I'll have to no doubt mingle with stuffed shirts, but it's better than wasting time in a boardroom all day, at the very least. You're right. We wouldn't want to risk ruining the reputation of billionaire playboy philanthropist Izuku Midoriya and his boyish charm. I don't think Kurogiri appreciates my sarcastic remark considering the yellow slants that serve as his eyes have narrowed a little. It's not like I'm actually bitter. Kurogiri already knows my public persona is all an act, flaunting my wealth and dating supermodels. It's misdirection and deception. Nobody would bother to question my nightlife nor suspect me of anything this way. Kurogiri steps a little closer so that he can adjust the collar of my yellow button-down. Your boyish charm can only get you so far. He then uses his wispy hands to smooth out the jacket of my blue leisure suit. It's an outfit that he'd personally put together. After all, Kurogiri knows more about formal attire than I do. I'm only looking out for your best interest, sir. Who else is going to? His hands come up to rest on my shoulders as he looks over my appearance one last time. He's right that I wouldn't look half as presentable without his help. I'd been difficult with my protests against wearing a suit and tie. And only after a long negotiation did we come to a compromise where I'd agreed to wear a leisure suit so long as there was no tie. Thank you, Kurogiri. I don't know what I would do without you. I return his gesture by placing one of my own hands on one of his shoulders. Quite frankly, sir, neither do I. He gives my shoulders a light squeeze before letting go of them. Then, he's gesturing towards the Rolls-Royce that's parked at the bottom of the hill, engine still running, waiting for its driver and passenger. I can't help but roll my eyes at his response, but humor him by obliging and heading for the car. It won't be a long drive. The museum was made here in Yokohama, near the statue that was erected in the Kamino Ward. All Might's sacrifice to stop the most powerful villain the world had ever seen engraved in stone there, as well as here. Though I doubt people visit his grave here in the cemetery as much as they do with the statue. Kurogiri's voice lets me know that he's trailing behind me. I've also taken the liberty of preparing flashcards for when it's your turn on stage, so I allow him to take the lead. He opens the door to the passenger seat before producing the aforementioned note cards from his coat jacket. You may want to make use of the ride to look them over. He then holds them out for me to take. I glance at the first flashcard in the set, grateful to see full sentences rather than bullet points. I hadn't had the time to prepare a speech of my own, meaning Kurogiri took the time to do so for me. I give him a nod of appreciation before climbing into the car, Kurogiri shutting the door behind me. While I wait for him to make his way to the driver's side, I return my gaze back to the flashcards. The first card is a simple introduction of myself and my business, Midoriya Enterprises, a company specializing in the production of suitable articles and items for each and every individual customer, ensuring that we can provide high-quality products that are highly adaptable. In other words, my company creates support equipment and costumes for licensed heroes. In a society where superpowers are passed off as a person's quirk, and those same people can become modern-day superheroes, it's only expected that someone who's quirkless such as myself can only be capable of providing them with support. It's not like I cornered the market or anything though. Long before I came along, there were companies like Detnerat or people like David Shield that supplied pro heroes with their suits and equipment. As a matter of fact, that's what the second card is about. David Shield had been All Might's original support engineer, leaving his daughter behind to take over the family business. Looks like it's my job to introduce her as the next speaker, according to the note card. Kurogiri finally climbs into the driver's seat, and I have half a mind to thank him for making my speech a short one, but I ultimately decide to let it go unsaid. Instead, I let my curiosity get the better of me and read the third card that he included. It's a closing statement. I hum in understanding as I take it in. So it'll also be my job to wrap everything up. It's not a lot that needs memorizing, but I can understand why Kurogiri would want me to read each card a few times. It's a short study at best, at least until I feel confident enough that I can give the speech without glancing at the cards or stumbling over my words. Before I know it, minutes have passed and we're nearing our destination that I can give it a rest. I'm not entirely surprised by what I see out the window when I look up. People in cosplay crowding the streets like it's a parade. Reporters holding interviews with a few of them who are willing to wait in lines. Amongst them are others that wave signs back and forth high above their heads. The love and support for All Might hasn't diminished in the slightest, even after his death and all of the years that passed in between. To be fair, All Might is the only hero to have held the position of #1 in hero rankings for as long as he did, not to mention everything All Might embodied. All Might had been thought of as more than a man. He was considered a symbol, the symbol of peace. Behind the crowd, hidden between the crevice of a brick building, I noticed the homeless man. Unlike the bright, colorful costumes that everyone else is wearing, the pallid vagrant has on articles of clothing that's just as faded as the light from his eyes. I'm reminded of the fault that was All Might's symbol, and how that led to its downfall. The peace that All Might had promised was contingent on himself. Once he died, there was no longer anyone to provide that same level of comfort. Everybody looked at All Might as though he were invincible, an all-powerful Superman, godlike. When they saw the truth, that image was shattered. All Might had always stood tall and muscular, like a statue. The villain he fought in Kamino Ward made that statue crumble. He was withered away, turned into something small and flimsy, something that toppled over after it had used everything it had left. I learned then that people need dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy. All Might couldn't do that because, as a man, he was flesh and blood. For a symbol to be everlasting, it must be something that can't be destroyed. It can't be human. For something to become incorruptible, for it to be something that can't be ignored. If I were to make myself more than just a man, if I could devote myself to an ideal, and they couldn't stop me, then I can become something else entirely. Master Midoriya. I'm pulled out of my rumination by Kurogiri's voice. The vehicle is slowing to a stop, paparazzi blocking its path from every side. We've arrived. The camera flashes and shouting muffled by the glass, apparently not having been enough for me to make that assessment. So we have. I don't even bother hiding the exasperation in my tone. It's better to release all of my true feelings now, so that covering them up during the event will be a little easier. Plastering a fake grin on my face and trying to sound enthused for hours on end when I'd rather be elsewhere is a lot harder than one would think. I hardly believe it's any more painful than your training or nightly escapades. It's no kidney stone, just a little socialization. Kurogiri turns his gaze from the paparazzi that's surrounding the car to meet my own. Who knows? You start pretending to have fun, you might wind up having a little by accident. As much as I'd like to say Kurogiri's words put me at ease, they don't come close. We'll see. I give him a half-hearted shrug anyways, before placing my hand on the door handle. I resist the urge to look over my shoulder as I brace for what's waiting on the other side. Just make sure you're ready to pick me up around back if it doesn't turn out that way. And push the door open. Immediately, without even having stepped foot outside the car yet, I'm greeted by a tidal wave of incomprehensible commotion. The paparazzi rushes to meet me, barely giving me room to breathe. They shout over one another, calling my name in attempts to gain my attention, but it's as deafening as crashing water. I hold up my hands in a placating gesture, but it's as useless as flailing your arms around while drowning. There's no use trying to respond to them, since they wouldn't be able to hear me over themselves anyways. The best I can do is feign a toothy smile and wave them away. It's like trying to swim against the tide as I push through them, but it'd be suffocating either way if I didn't. I'm sure Moses had an easier time parting the Red Sea anyways. Eventually, I managed to make it through the crowd, though they may as well be guarding the entrance to the event, since the mill's barriers meant to keep them at bay are what's waiting for me at the end. Police officers keep the paparazzi back while I show them my ID in order to be let through. Then, it's a little easier to walk and breathe. At least, I don't have a microphone or a camera shoved in my face from every angle. Instead, a man in a dark blue blazer with an unmatching brown tie and pale pink shirt moves briskly to be the next person who invades my personal space. At this distance, the square-shaped glasses and noticeable facial wrinkles tells me he is my elder. It's the single bullhorn poking out from his forehead. What was likely a second horn filed down to the butt on the other side. That is his most prominent feature though. I recognize him then because of his quirk. This is Deikaku Miyagi. He used to be a newscaster years ago, but worked his way up the ladder to become the editor-in-chief now. Mr. Midoriya, fancy meeting you here. He stops short in front of me before bending deeply at the waist and holding the bow. It's a pleasure. I return the greeting with one of my own to be polite. The pleasure is all mine. Bowing at the waist as well. though I only hold my bow for as long as he does from then on. Miyagi runs a hand through his straw-colored hair as he straightens himself, trying to keep it slicked back behind his head in order to maintain a formal appearance. He clears his throat and then begins to introduce himself. I'm Daikaku Miyagi, editor-in-chief of NHK World. I know, but I finish his sentence to save us both the time of him having to give me an oral autobiography. I would have thought you'd send a journalist or a reporter to interview me instead of yourself. Were you not willing to pay them for working overtime or something? And pretend to laugh at my own joke to show him it's a remark made in good nature, though the main goal is to make him cut to the chase and avoid beating around the bush. He laughs along while shaking his head in denial. It's nothing like that. I just wanted to see this all for myself. Then turning to seem as though he's taking it all in. The ex-newscaster sounds sincere enough that I refrain from questioning him. You know, I used to report on All Might himself back in the day. He adds it mostly as an afterthought. I just hum in acknowledgement, not really knowing what would be appropriate to respond with. Rather than allow us to fall into an uncomfortable silence, I use the moment as a chance to start moving forward, hoping that it'll give me an opportunity to slip away sooner. Miyagi must notice, since he follows my lead and begins walking with me. From my peripheral vision, I catch Miyagi still staring at me. Rough night, he asks. I turn my head with my gaze to him, prompting him to continue now that he knows for certain that I'm listening. You look tired. Any concern he may have is masked by a tone of amusement that asks, wine, women, or song. I can't exactly tell him the truth of how I usually spend my nights. So I instead respond with a forced laugh and do my best to make my grimace look more like a grin. All three, I answer, and in the wrong combination, I'm afraid. Miyagi snorts like he's holding back a laugh. You must have quite the nightlife, Mr. Midoriya. He shakes his head in disbelief to the point that a lock of hair comes loose, then quickly uses his hand to smooth it over again, and continues to primp even after that, also adjusting his glasses so that they aren't sliding down to the bridge of his nose. The primping must be a nervous tic. I can tell that there's more he wants to say. If the bead of sweat rolling down his neck, dry swallowed by his Adam's apple, isn't another clear indication. I doubt he's a man who plays poker if he's this bad at hiding his emotions. I'm assuming he wants me to sponsor NHK World or make a charitable donation, but his nerves are too on fire to ask. I'll have Kurogiri write out a check for him later regardless of if he works up the courage or not. I pick up the pace, no longer wanting to make small talk, and the night is still young. It's a relief to see the throng of other attendants up ahead. I can't waste it all on you. No offense, so that I can use the crowd as an excuse to leave him behind. Most of the people mingling around begin to flock towards me anyways, making it a little easier. Instantaneously, it becomes a maelstrom of whoever can avert my attention the longest. I'm greeted by businessmen handing me their cards and models trying to whisper in my ear. Frankly, I'd feel less claustrophobic being surrounded by actual criminals than the likes of these people. Fake smiles and curt bows or waves aren't always enough to ward them off. Evidence to the fact is Miyagi still orbiting me as well. Suddenly, a more assertive and distinguishably feminine voice breaks through the rest. Sorry everyone. It draws my attention since it's the only one addressing anyone other than myself, but I need to steal Mr. Midoriya away for a while. The owner of the voice grabs onto the crook of my left arm with soft hands, planning to use it as a means to drag me away from the crowd. Before deciding whether or not I should allow this to happen, I turn my gaze to see who's so bold. Looking through the lens of their oval-framed glasses, I make eye contact. The aqua-blue gaze doesn't break away from my own. It holds and dares me to glance elsewhere first. I do, and realize that she's an American speaking fluent Japanese. Wavy blonde hair reaches down her back and hangs over her shoulders. This must be Melissa Shield, the director of 𝐼-Island. Though we've never met in person until now, I've been sure to keep tabs on her. Shield's father had been arrested long ago for aiding and abetting a villain group, giving me some incentive to be wary. Not to mention the reason why she's in attendance being her relation to All Might, and her father having been All Might's sidekick and support equipment provider at one time. Are you okay with that? It takes me a moment to realize that the question is directed towards me. Shield and everyone else waits expectantly for my answer. A second to compose myself is all I need to rekindle the suave persona that I'm used to using as a mask in the public eye. Only if it's for a while. I make sure to say it in a teasing tone and flash them a toothy grin. The joke gets a few chuckles and seemingly amused eye rolls. Shield just gives me a small smile of her own before gently tugging on my arm in the direction that she would like to go. During the short while it takes us to walk away from the crowd, I notice Shield's dress is a dark blue that matches my suit. No wonder the color of her eyes were so pronounced. Thank you for saving me from those vultures. If I'd worn a tie, I have a feeling that it'd be the only thing left of me once they'd have been through. It's probably best that I try to make conversation rather than observe and analyze her from the corner of my eye though. Good thing you didn't wear a tie then. Her remark makes me raise a questionable brow. She takes it as a prompt to elaborate. I have you all in one piece this way, before bringing us to a stop and circling around to the front of me so that we face one another properly. It's time to act oblivious. What for? Did you want an autograph or something? I pretend as though I don't know who she is already. Wouldn't it be better to have your tie as a souvenir if that's all I wanted? She replies with an amused smirk, then quickly shakes her head, making the smile vanish like an etch-a-sketch. I'm here for my island, where I run a support company like you do. Since we mostly wind up shipping support equipment from the island to here in Japan anyways, I thought it best to meet with you and suggest a collaboration. I have to admittedly blink back the slight surprise that comes with her blunt proposition. I hadn't been expecting any of that. I don't think you're talking about a merger, but I doubt you just want to be a sponsor either. This is probably something better to discuss with my board of directors. I tell her honestly. Then remember that I need to continue feigning ignorance. It might help if I could tell them your name though, miss. Oh, it's now her turn to briefly look surprised with a blink of her own. Please excuse my manners. I thought you already knew. She bows apologetically before telling me, I'm Melissa Shield. You can call me by my first or last name, whichever you're more comfortable with. No need to apologize. It's a pleasure meeting you, Miss Shield. I'm quick to assure her that she's done nothing wrong. While she seems well-versed in Japanese customs, I'm sure there's a constant concern about making a mistake. I know from personal experience that learning a foreign language and their traditions can be difficult. I consider speaking English to accommodate her instead, but instantly discard the idea for the sake of risking looking actually competent. After a relieved expression washes over her face, she slowly begins to relax. You may not know this either, but I wanted to be in attendance for the museum's opening as well. I was rather close with 𝗏𝗏, so I really appreciate what you're doing here. And I can see the genuinity glimmering in her eyes, if not only the sound of thanks in her voice. Again, it's all my pleasure. I used to be a big fan of his when I was a lot younger. I decided it's okay to open up a little and tell the truth. I wanted nothing more than to be just like him, to save people with a smile. The light laugh I let escape my lips at the memory of how I used to watch the same video of him saving people must be as mirthless as my smile. What stopped you? And drawn from my rumination by Shield's curiosity. She must notice, because she suddenly becomes flustered and begins backpedaling. If you don't mind me asking, I was just wondering why you didn't, but you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. It's just, I figured All Might went to UA here in Japan, so you could have too, and I have to cut her off before she forgets to breathe. That's probably a story better reserved for another time. I can see the earlier shine to her eyes lose their sparkle at that answer. It probably doesn't help that I interrupted her mid-sentence either. However, it's safe to say being quirkless didn't help matters, so I throw her a metaphorical bone to make up for it. It's not like my lack of a quirk being the reason that I didn't pursue heroics professionally is a complete lie. She doesn't perk back up, but she does nod in understanding with a small smile that's likely more meant to pacify me than herself. I grew up on Island, so I don't know the full extent of what it's like. But I'm quirkless too. That isn't new knowledge to me, but I act surprised anyways. I wanted to be a hero, like you, but my father and everyone else told me that it was too dangerous to try. You thought that you could help people another way, by making support equipment. I come to my own rational conclusion. It's only after I've said it that I realize I did so aloud. Well, it's not the most analytical reasoning that I could have accidentally allowed to slip. Shield tilts her head, perhaps inquisitively. Are you talking about me or yourself? It's hard to tell whether she's making a quip or returning my analysis with one of her own. I decide to go with the former. It's better to do something, instead of nothing at all. I shrug as though there's no merit to those words, but note that they resonate from the way that she nods in agreement. My eyes dart away from her momentarily, noticing an empty podium on an equally vacant stage. It's then that I remember she isn't just a guest, but also a speaker. That's what I gather from your presence here, being brave enough to go up on stage and all. So I return her quip with one of my own. Shield blinks in surprise again. How did you know? She trails off purposely once she sees me digging into the inside of my suit jacket. The answer to her question is on the note cards that Kurogiri gave me. I wave them for dramatic effect. I may have done a little last-minute studying. She takes the flashcards from me to read for herself, and so I elaborate. My butler takes care of me in more ways than one. She stops reading and looks up from the cards. For some reason, her expression appears to be more shocked than it was previously. Slowly, that look on her face softens. So, you actually can smile like that. She holds the cards out for me to take back, but I'm too taken aback by what she said to register my own movement right now. Hey, I make an incomprehensible sound of confusion instead of putting together the right words to ask her what she means. That and whatever expression that I have on my face must be enough though, because she's already explaining before I can process anything else. You had me worried. Sure, you were always smiling real friendly like, but it also looked so empty that it hurt to stare at. I want to assure her that what she's saying isn't the case, but wind up swallowing too hard that whatever words I could have responded with become lost. Since I didn't say anything otherwise, she takes that as a sign that she should continue. It's like you're missing something and you're using a grin to hide it. She shrugs her shoulders with a small sigh as if to dismiss the thought. That's how it looked to me, anyway. I let my guard down. I hadn't realized S.H.I.E.L.D. was so perceptive. Looks like I'll have to do damage control. Shaking out the prior confusion and straightening my posture with an equally dismissive laugh, I finally force myself to take back the note cards that she's been holding out the entire time. It's hard to have a genuine smile when mingling with these stuffed shirts. It's a lame excuse, but it's the best that I can come up with on the fly. It's hard to see whether she's convinced or not, but S.H.I.E.L.D. smiles in kind with another small nod of affirmation. In that case, you must be very fond of your butler to smile like you did when talking about him. So that's what she noticed as different about my smile. That's a good enough basis for me to work with and make justifiable. Well, he did practically raise me. And it's the truth. I've been too sincere this entire conversation, come to think of it. I may need to stop being honest after this if I'm going to cover my tracks accordingly. Luckily, somebody else interjects before the issue can be pushed any further. There you are. A bright and bubbly hitch-pitched voice carries itself in between me and S.H.I.E.L.D. The clicking of high heels alerts me to the newcomer's presence before they present themselves. I've been looking all over for you. The partygoer is also female and somebody that I recognize almost immediately. She's a slender woman in a dress that's hot pink, the hue matching what looks like a perpetual blush dusting her cheeks more than any amount of makeup ever could. Brown bobbed hair bounces with the pep in her step. Just getting a glimpse of her, I can already tell that something about the overly cheerful personality is abnormal. Izuku Midoriya, right? She stops short as though she's a car that was about to run a red light. Whatever excitement she's trying to contain leaks through the waving of her hands, allowing me to get a glance at the pink pads on the tips of her fingers. A finger contact quirk, where all 5 digits must touch something to work. The profile fits. This is Ochako Uraraka, the pro-heroine known as Uravity. Even so, I still can't shake the feeling that something about her isn't right. I hadn't met her prior to now, so there's no real way of knowing, I suppose. In order to be polite, I give her the best toothy grin that I can muster, in the flesh, and she must like the smile or my quippy response since she returns the grin with one of her own. How broad her cheeks widen to flash her teeth is a tad unsettling though. And you are. Miss S.H.I.E.L.D. takes it upon herself to make further introductions. From the corner of my eye, I can see that she too is a bit disturbed by Uraraka's sudden interruption. It's hard to tell whether S.H.I.E.L.D. is trying to include Uraraka or if she's potentially jealous by the shift in attention though. When my gaze returns to Uraraka, the brunette looks unfazed. You can call me Ochako. S.H.I.E.L.D. isn't the only one who raises an eyebrow at the informal introduction. You must be Melissa S.H.I.E.L.D. That's right. S.H.I.E.L.D. seems taken aback that Uraraka already knows who she is. Though she doesn't pry into the matter, so I'll chalk it off as nothing too significant. Since S.H.I.E.L.D. appears to be uncomfortable with their interaction, I figure this is the best moment for me to reinsert myself into the conversation. Was there something that I could help you with? I nod my head towards Uraraka since she did seek me out earlier. And there must be a reason for it. Uraraka flashes her teeth still, chubby cheeks somehow stretching even more than they already were. I wanted to ask you why you're making this museum for All Might. I want to get to know you and understand you better. It's an odd response, but one that sounds like it's coming from a place of sincerity. Her tone and body language is overly eager, like she's yearning for something. It'd make sense if what she's craving for is simple information like she claims. Oh, any particular reason? But I have to be certain that the request isn't part of some ulterior motive. What she said is also laced with an undertone of malice, or perhaps a strange suspicion like the one that I have for her. It's not like she's a reporter or an investigative journalist. It's out of the ordinary for her to be asking personal questions and seeking answers from them. Her head tilts to the side, as though the weight of the question is more than her curiosity. There's a hesitance to what she's about to say. She mulls it over in her head, and judging by the bob of her throat, swallows it down. Can't a girl just be curious? It's as innocent an answer as it is playful or flirtatious to the unobservant ear. This is a cautious response. It's more calculated than what she was going to say originally. She's hiding something. If girls are allowed to be curious, then boys should be allowed as well. I'm curious as to why Ochako Uraraka, in as little to under 2 minutes, used 4 different accents. The most distinct of her range were the opposing northern and southern dialects of Kyoto, Osaka, and Tokyo. Not to mention, I caught more than a whiff of spirit gum adhesive, solvent, resin, and mastics can mean only one thing. This woman is wearing a false face. This is not Ochako Uraraka. Already, I'm trying to think of ways to confirm my suspicions. In the meantime, I continue to feign ignorance and keep an equally false face plastered on. My disguise is hopefully not as easy to see through though. Time to use some of that boyish charm that a bachelor such as myself is renowned for. Sure, except, if boys gave away all their secrets then girls would lose all their curiosity. It's a response meant to misdirect her disguised as good-natured teasing. It's the same trick that she tried to use. The 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐼𝐴 impersonator opens her mouth, on the brink of a reply, when the lights suddenly go out without warning. No flicker, no stall, no flashing. Just a sudden outage. Alarmed and startled shouts echo across the room as the shrieks bounce off the walls. I can't help the way that my body tenses up, prepared for an attack. It helps that my eyes adjust sooner than everyone else's though. Then, a single spotlight draws everyone's attention, including mine. Under the glow is a lanky figure who leans on a cane. A crimson coat is buttoned up the entire length of their height, an equally red wide-brimmed hat covering the features of their face. Until they look up, a full face masked the color of gold stares out into the crowd. The light glints off of it like a mirror. You have all been blind. Now rejoice, for I have casted a light. The interloper addresses everyone in the room with a broad sweep of their free hand. Whoever this is has taken more steps than one to conceal their identity. A voice modulator adjusts the pitch from high to low. Suddenly, I sense movement to my right and allow my gaze to shift a bit. From the corner of my eye, I see that it's 𝐒𝐴𝐳𝐳𝐴 who's leaning forward. Except, I remember that she isn't the real 𝐒𝐴𝐳𝐳𝐴. She's not a pro hero who would step in to stop whoever decided to crash this event. The only logical conclusion I come to is that she is potentially the tall red figure's accomplice. I snatch her wrist with a grip strong enough to stop her, but not too tight that it'd leave a bruise. As expected, that earns a glare from the impersonator. It's hard to return in the dark, so I respond with a small shake of my head to make it seem like I'm concerned for her safety rather than suspicious. It dawns on me that this is possibly the only opportunity that I'll have to get a tracker on her, so I also take this physical contact as a chance to plant one. We're all categorized as either heroes or villains. The red figure continues speaking regardless of whether the impersonator was meant to do something or not. At the end of the day, violence is violence, and that line assures me that if she was meant to do something, that the interference on my part was the right choice. Who decides what is right and what is wrong? What was once the symbol of peace and now All Might's replacement, the symbol of hope, is nothing but a bludgeon of oppression. The crowd responds with a chorus of gasps. But the imposing orator is unfazed by it, calling yourselves heroes and villains, killing one another. You only have yourselves to blame. A short pause, and then a huff so quiet that one might mistake it for a sigh. This isn't a speech. This is a rant. The rest of you look the other way when things turn sour, and the low growl from the voice modulator assists in making the aggravation heard. You bury yourselves in your jobs and your hero worship. You consume propaganda masquerading as entertainment like the U.S. sports festival. With a stomp of their cane for emphasis, the red figure raises their voice. The message is always the same. Don't think, don't question. And what becomes of a society that's become reliant on heroes or sinks low enough to encourage them as villains? The next brief break is much more silent than the first one. Nobody makes a peep that would suggest they disagree in the slightest with the red figure's opinion. I don't need to soften my grip on the fake 𝐒𝐻𝐴𝐳𝐴, because she slackens all on her own, all fight leaving her body. The interloper is starting to get through to the crowd. I need to stop this before it goes any further. The society rots. It becomes full of liars, cheaters, and thugs, uptown and downtown. The suit in the penthouse is no better than the guy selling drugs on the corner. The figure spreads both arms in a grandeur gesture, cane held high in one hand. Anarchy ensues. That is why I am here, to make sure that you see it firsthand like I did. I grit my teeth, biting back my own bile that threatens to climb its way up my throat. Whatever words that I may have to counter with never reach the surface. In my current attire, unmasked no less, I know that I can't take action either. Consider this a declaration of war on hero society. Peace is gone, and there will soon be no hope. Not from 𝐿, not from dynamite, not from anyone. The anarchist tilts their head down so that their hat shadows their golden face mask. Then, as sudden and fast as they had arrived, the spotlight allows for them to vanish. The room is plunged into darkness for the fraction of a second, long enough to blind everyone momentarily, followed by the return of the room light, only prolonging the adaptation to the sudden shift in brightness. As my eyes adjust from the rapid change in lighting, I realize that the crimson agitator wasn't the only one who disappeared. The woman that was impersonating 𝐒𝐴𝐳𝐴 also managed to slip away. They escaped. Once the crowd dispersed and was evacuated, the museum became a crime scene. Police barriers and caution tapes sectioned off different areas. Forensics and detectives spread out and searched for anything that could aid their investigation. The arrival of a supposed new villain was the talk of the night. Meanwhile, I was quartered off to the side with a few others for questioning. I had waited for my turn to be interviewed, but it still hadn't come. Everyone seemed to be taking their time. That I decided to use that to my advantage and perform my own investigation of the crime scene. The thing about this particular interruption of the event is that it did more than prevent the museum's ceremony from happening. It was a deliberate interference and not just a nonsensical intrusion. All Might represented hero society, supporting it as a pillar. With his downfall, that time of peace was nearly forgotten. The museum was meant to be a reminder of that peace, of that golden age of superheroes. It was about rekindling hope in people. The anarchists didn't just prevent that from happening, but they had also warped the meaning of it into something else. The new number 1 hero, 𝗵𝗲, isn't enough to inspire hope in people. Neither is the number 2 hero or the number 3. People don't want a replacement of All Might. Yet, they don't want anyone other than All Might either. That was what the museum was meant to be for, as a resolution to that problem. The anarchist understood this and exploited it as a weakness. The anarchist had declared war. I work on inspecting the spot where they had done so. A spotlight meant for the stage where Miss Shield and I were going to give speeches was used for the anarchist instead. I look up and see that the light fixture is directed towards the ground. It was never directed at the stage since the very beginning, which means that this whole order of events was more than just premeditated. The 𝗬𝗏𝗂 impersonator, or perhaps the anarchist himself, must have had access to the equipment beforehand. Not to mention, when I squint my eyes to get a better look, I notice something else attached to the ceiling. It looks like a camera. No, it's shaped like one, but it would have been taken if it were meant for recording something. I need to take it down and get a closer examination of it. Except, I don't want to contaminate the object with my own fingerprints if there's any chance the culprit could have left theirs. It's not like I have gloves to prevent that, but even if I did, those could smudge another person's fingerprints. Gloves are only good for not leaving behind your own. I'll have to use my suit jacket and hope that's enough. With a little effort, I manage to cradle the device in the fabric. Upon closer inspection, I realize that it's a projector and not a video camera. On the side of it, there's a timecode embedded. It was meant to go off on a timer and project something. For all I know, maybe it did. There's only one way to find out. So I click the button that makes it play, and a red figure reappears out of thin air, nearly making me drop the projector. Except, I notice that the anarchist is clearly transparent and not actually physically present. Suddenly, it all makes sense and the metaphorical puzzle pieces click together. This is why the speech carried on regardless of the 𝗬𝗏𝗂 impersonator performing their part or the audience's reaction. Even the glint on the gold-plated mask can be explained. I pause the recording at that very moment, seeing that it's the reflection of whatever camera lens filmed the anarchist's message. The projector is a valuable piece of evidence. Before I get to use it any further though, I feel a hand placing itself on my shoulder. It's non-threatening. I can tell from how light it is, so I instantly remember that there are other investigators here. There are police who could use this evidence instead. They likely need it more than I do. You're not allowed over here. I allow myself to be turned around so that I can put the voice to a face. It belongs to a man in a tan overcoat, who's wearing an equally colored bucket hat. He must be working overtime lately, since he hasn't bothered to shave the stubble climbing down his graying mustache and under his chin. I apologize for wandering off. It's just, well, I own this museum and figured I should have a look around for myself. The first excuse that comes to mind is the easiest to give. It's not an entirely convincing argument, but it's one that can be easily dismissed as it is disputable. I see. Even so, I can't have you moving freely about the crime scene. His voice is passive, but still skeptical as his rectangular eyes venture down past his eye bags into the device in my hands. What do you have there? He gestures with a small nod towards it. I remember what I've already told myself. The police likely require this piece of evidence more than I do. I have other means of tracking down and capturing the anarchist, such as the tracking device that I planted on their supposed accomplice. I can afford to hand the projector over. Well, that's a good question. You see, this actually isn't part of the museum. I noticed it out of place and presumed it might have something to do with the villain who broke in. I make sure to hand the projector over while giving my cover story in the hopes that it might distract the man from thinking about it too much. There's a pensive raise of the brow from the man, along with what must be a habitable upturn of his mustache that goes along with it. While I appreciate your assistance, I also advise against touching supposed evidence. You could contaminate the crime scene that way. He regains his composure once he's done passing judgment, but again anyways, thank you. I'll have some of my people take a look at it. His people, that means he isn't just an officer or a forensic scientist. Judging by his age, he likely has years of experience under his belt, but he doesn't appear to be the lead detective either. Could he be somebody higher up? Captain, Commissioner, I'll have to find out. The pleasure is all mine. Mister, I make a show of tilting my head in a curious manner so that he doesn't miss the implied request for a name. 𝗧𝗵𝗏. He gives a tip of his hat before gesturing for me to follow him back the way that I came. I'd like to discuss your involvement a little further in detail back at the station if you don't mind. Of course, after you make your statement here. There's no real hurry. 𝗧𝗵𝗏. That name rings a bell. Whenever I did a background check of the law enforcement in Japan to know which of them were corrupt and which weren't, I came across a detective named 𝗵𝗲 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Of course, that was years ago, before the detective received several promotions, all the way to commissioner. He remained clean as far as I can tell, which goes with his nickname, True Man. A genuinely honest person. That may have to do with his quirk, a form of lie detection, which means I got lucky by holding back on telling any lies just now. But unluckily, that means I have to still continue to tell the truth. You may have to come by my office instead, or leave open-ended suggestions instead of answers at the very least, since the truth is, I won't be sticking around to give a statement anymore, let alone swinging by the station for an interrogation. That can be arranged. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 falls into step beside me so that he can glance over any particular reason why it has to be that way though. Always asking questions. If not for his prior position as a detective, I dare say he's just used to it due to his quirk. I have somewhere else to be right now, and I'm able to say that, because it's not a lie. 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐳 keeps a warp gate open for me in the alley behind the museum. It's faster than taking the car back. It saves me the time of having to go through the manor. It's a doorway right into the cave beneath my house where I've set up a base of operations. It's a place storing the supercomputer that my tech department built. The same supercomputer that's linked to the tracker planted on the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 impersonator. 𝗒𝐻𝐢𝐳𝐲's warp gate closes behind me, making the monitor's faint glow the only source of light for the time being. On it is a map of Naruhodo, a red blip marking the imitator's location there. If I'm going out for the night, to see a lady no less, then I'd better dress for the occasion. And I've already given my suit jacket to 𝗧𝗵𝗲 with the projector. Instead, I'll have to wear my other suit. After a retinal scan, a hand scan, and a number code that's the date of my parents' murder, a glass case begins to lift out of the ground. It's so clean that it has a reflective surface. It's like staring into a mirror. Cloaked in darkness like the bats hanging from stalactites in this very cave, hangs a cape from a cowl. Atop the head are two horns the length of an index finger. Beneath that, a symbol with wings that stretch to shoulders. The demonic visage stares back through hollow eyes. I take off my mask as Izuku Midoriya and look into the reflection again. The night stares back. Vengeance stares back. The bat stares back. I am the night. I am vengeance. I am Batman. The street's cracked asphalt is as dark as the starless sky above it. Whether the murky fog that touches both as pollution from shafts or descending clouds is indiscernible. It's not much to see, but I see it all from up here, crouching amongst the many gargoyles of a rooftop that's among many other rooftops. Perched from this position, I'll be able to spot any discrepancies in the environment. As such, I keep my eyes trained on what's ahead of me, not bothering to check what pouch of my utility belt that I'm reaching into. Only after I have the handheld pocket device that's transmitting the signal of the tracker I planted do I allow my eyes to change what they're looking at. The miniature map tells me the person I'm hunting should be just beneath me in the alley that snakes between two apartment complexes. My cape isn't just for theatricality. It has various functionalities, one of which allows me to expand it like a bat-shaped parachute and descend safely through the fog. It's a much more silent approach as well. The contact of boots with cement is barely a slap once I land. I'd followed the signal all the way here once it stopped. But it's been stopped for hours now, and this alley isn't an apartment or a house. Not to mention the lack of pedestrians or late-night drivers in this area. Whoever I've been following has made sure to stay out of sight. They could possibly be baiting me, which is why I surveyed my surroundings before engaging. From the lack of presence in the alley besides myself, I'd say that it did little good. One more brief glance at the screen on the device in my gloved hand shows that it's no mistake though. I put it back in my utility belt, no longer needing to reference it for any change in coordinates. Instead, I return to inspecting the area. There's no manhole cover or sewer grates that might suggest the signal is coming from beneath me. Just garbage bags surrounding an overfilled dumpster. Empty beer bottles. A puddle. It hasn't rained and it doesn't appear to be water though. I take a few steps towards it and get down on one knee for a closer look. I wasn't wrong that it's a puddle of some type of liquid at the very least. It looks like it has a thick consistency despite being wet and has a gray colorization to it. Could it be undried cement? In case it's hazardous or some type of acid, I refrain from sticking my finger in it and use a stick swab instead. It reacts like a sticky sort-of substance, clinging to the swab and stretching like putty, but oozing all the same like it's just a pile of goop. I notice then that there's something sunken into it already. It's small enough to be a flea or a tick. Not wanting to get the gray slime on my hands, I remove a pair of tweezers from my belt and use the tool to pull out the tiny object. At first, I think it's just a pebble or chipped asphalt. However, when I bring it up to my face, I don't need a microscope to recognize it. A quick check on the handheld device confirms it. The screen transmits a signal from my very location. The tracking device that I placed on the 𝗂𝗧𝗏 impersonator is what I found. She must have found it and ditched it here. I've been led to a dead end and gave my only other lead to Commissioner 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Except, that doesn't explain what this gray goop is still. It has the scent of spirit gum, but not the physical properties. It appears to be malleable, but doesn't react like clay would. Whatever this stuff is, it's a complete mystery. I'll have to take a sample back to the cave to be analyzed in my personal crime lab. Just a test tube full should do the trick. It's more a tedious task scooping it up than actually studying it. Nonetheless, once I'm able to identify the substance, it might give me a clue. For the time being, it's all I've got to go on anymore. Seemingly out of nowhere, I sense a presence rushing towards me from behind. There's a telltale slap of bare feet against concrete to go along with it. My body moves on its own. In one swift defensive motion of Aikido martial arts, I stop a knife that was aimed for my side and likely meant to pierce either a lung or a kidney. However, the attacker has combat experience of their own, already countering with an acrobatic maneuver that sends them sailing over my head. It's meant to free them of my grip. I allow it. When fighting somebody with a knife or blade-related quirk, it's always best to put distance between yourselves. Jumping back just in case the attacker tries to slash, stab, or strike at me again, I'm finally able to get a clear look at whoever they are. It's a woman. Blonde hair is a mess of wild strands. Thin yellow eyes are predatory. A pointed grin becomes a flash of fangs. I'm more taken aback by her lack of clothing than the hostile body language. I'm being attacked by a naked and feral blonde lady. Right, whatever. I guess I've seen crazier. She darts head-on with an upward swing of the knife in her hand. It's not sloppy, but it isn't refined either. Since she has nothing on to conceal any other weapons, I can use both hands to focus on disarming her of just this one. I grab a hold of her arm, just beneath her wrist where I can press down on a pressure point with my thumb, and bring my other hand up on her elbow for extra measure to make her release the blade. I hold back on how hard I strike the bone so that it doesn't break and only causes enough discomfort to make her reconsider trying to kill me. Like a wounded animal, the nude blonde yelps in pain. The knife slips from her grip and begins to fall. Except, it never clatters onto the ground. The woman uses her free hand to snatch the knife in midair and makes an attempt at slashing my stomach. The pointed tip passes over the dyneema material that protects me. Had it connected, my intestines would have been pouring out right about now. The knife user then rolls so that her feet lift off of the floor, going airborne for a second time, cartwheeling to get away. I don't let go this time. I twist with her. Instead of loosening my hold on her, I tighten the grip. It's going to bruise, but it'll let her know that I'm done playing games. The slanted eyes widen a bit and her fangs gnash together in a pained grimace. Her head swings back, hair swishing with the brisk movement. She's winding up for a head collision. Instead of reciprocating, I lift my knee. It connects with her jaw when her head swings forward. That rattles her skull and puts her off balance. That's my opportunity to switch my hands to her other arm, finally getting her to lose the knife. That doesn't stop the crazed woman from lashing out with another sharp object. She uses her own nails, like a pair of claws, viciously and wildly swiping at me like a rabid animal. The angered shriek she lets loose is befitting. Panic is making her react this way. I need to put an end to this already. A quick jab, but practically a gentle love tap, to her throat. The war cry is silenced by gagging. While she's struggling to suck in her next breath, I cup each of my hands for a double ear slap, turning her head into a sandwich with my hands as the bread is all it'll take to bring her down. Striking her this way sends a shock wave down her ear canal, which will rupture the tympanum. By shocking the more delicate inner ear mechanisms, it'll result in a severe dizziness. The nude blonde doesn't even stumble or stagger. She instantly falls backwards, landing on the pile of trash that's been accumulated around the dumpster. The fallen wheezes and greedily gasps at whatever air can be breathed in as she lays there. There's no sign of her making any attempt to attack again, let alone bother trying to stand up. It's over. Now that I have a moment to process what's transpired, I start calculating the possibilities and scenarios of it all in my head. Most likely, this woman is the one who impersonated Ochako Uraraka. I don't know how she went undetected until now, but this may have been meant to be an ambush. On the other hand, there's always the chance that this may be a pure coincidence, and this is just a homeless woman that was scavenging for scraps. This could all be a simple misunderstanding. I don't know whether to be intimidating or to make an attempt at being comforting. Just by wearing this outfit, I'm usually threatening. So I leave it at that and find a middle ground, by keeping my distance from her as to not frighten her any more than I already may be. Who are you? I also make my voice monotonous with a low level so she doesn't mistake me as angry. She groans and stirs, still not quite recovered. I allow her a few more seconds to regulate her breathing. Then, finally, she looks ready to talk. That wasn't very nice, Batsy. She haggardly heaves herself upright. So, she's heard of Batman. That's not too surprising, but it isn't expected of everyone I come across either. I'm about as renowned as an underground hero would be in comparison to a daylight hero. The woman suddenly notices her state of undress, drawing her legs up and wrapping her arms around her exposed feminine parts. You pervert. But the accusation has no actual bite nor bashful nature to it. Her unkempt hair hangs over her face, hiding whatever expression she may have, whether it be embarrassment or anger. I detach my cape from my shoulders and toss it towards her. Like a blanket, the cloth drapes over her petite frame. Once her body is no longer exposed, she finally glances up. I don't expect the look of bewilderment that she has on her face. Perhaps she isn't used to acts of kindness. Or it could be that she wasn't expecting to see a man beneath the black cloak that I normally use to conceal my own body. Who are you? I repeat myself, more pronounced this time. The look of puzzlement goes away, replaced by a toothy grin. Her yellow eyes glimmer in the night, as though they glow in the dark. They stare directly into my own. Her cheeks gradually redden as she answers, Himiko. I'm Himiko Toga. Himiko Toga. I recognize that name from criminal records. She was a part of the League of Villains. A majority of the League members were either caught or killed. Looks like this is one of the few stragglers. It seems as though my first guess was the right one. Toga is far from innocent. She's a murderer and wouldn't have hesitated to kill me earlier. I had also read on her file that her quirk allows her to imitate others so long as she consumes their blood. That all but confirms she's the one who had pretended to be 𝗂𝗵𝗿 at the museum. She must have not actually noticed the tracker that I put on her until after she shedded her disguise. Even with that resolved, there's still a lot that I don't know yet. Why were you impersonating 𝗂𝗵𝗿 at the All Might Museum opening? Do you work with the person in red who interrupted the ceremony? I'll have to pry a few answers out of her from myself before handing her over to the police. She recoils at that. You ask a lot of questions, 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿. The fake pout is as intolerable as the nickname that she's given me. My annoyance must show through my mask, because she's quick to blurt out, I don't think I can tell you any of that. In a sense, that's its own confirmation. What are you planning? I take a step closer to put pressure on her. Can't tell you that either. She suddenly tosses my cape up and it expands enough to cover my vision of her. When I grab the cloth and yank it away, she's no longer there. I know every type of vanishing trick that can be pulled with a cape, and she just used one. Except, there's no way that she could have gotten far. I turn around while simultaneously putting my cape back on. Like last time Toga randomly appeared, I sense her presence again. This ability to erase her presence must be another skill of hers. She has the knife in her hand again, recovered and ready to fight a second round. Bleed for me, 𝗧𝗵𝗿. A savage swipe at my chest just barely grazes the insignia there. I sidestep the next slash and lean away from the one after that. I drop down, ducking under another attempt to cut me, and sweep Toga's legs out from under her. She lands on her ass with a squeak. Yet, she doesn't let go of the knife and she's quick to get back on her feet. The 3 prongs on my vambraces allow me to deflect the next swipe of her knife, then block the attempt to push through and stab me. It's a barrage of attacks followed by a butterfly kick that misses its mark. She's quick, agile. I still manage to predict each of her moves. Yet, she leaves me no time to think. No chance to come up with my own. I have to arch myself backwards and bend hard to avoid an axe kick. She has long legs, giving her a longer reach with them. I could probably maintain my defense all night and simply tire her out. Slowly wearing her down seems like a good tactic. However, I also don't want to waste my time. The sooner I stop her and the anarchist, the sooner that I catch them, the better. I could be needed elsewhere. I could be somewhere else. I should be out there saving lives, not fighting this League of Villains refugee. She's not even killing anybody herself, and she's still putting people in danger by simply occupying me. Toga is going for my abdomen with her knife again. It's then that I stop holding back. I get her in a 𝗃𝗲𝗄 arm lock and go through with severing the bone at the elbow this time. The shriek that comes out of her mouth is louder and more agonized than her cry from our first round. Recent combat history continues to repeat itself. I silence her yell by striking her in the neck. The scream dies in her throat. Toga must be expecting an ear slap next. She gets a broken nose instead. Blood splurts out from her nostrils as she's sent reeling back. Her legwork is non-existent as they desperately struggle to keep her standing. I give them a chance to rest by tripping her with the heel of my boot against her ankle. The rest is up to gravity. The blonde goes down, without a soft cushion of garbage to brace the fall this time. Enough. I let my anger be heard. There's nobody in this alley to save. I'm in the wrong one. I'm wasting time in the wrong alley when I could be watching over the right one. It's all because of her. She's horrified. Our eyes lock onto each other, and all I can see in them is sheer terror. There's no more bloodlust. Thawne is the voyeuristic rictus grin. I'm towering over her like a monster shrouded in darkness. I'm the boogeyman come to hurt her. I'm the man in the alley. All she looks like to me now is a victim. It must look that way to somebody else too. A resounding crack makes me think a gun has been fired. Maybe the gun has been fired. It's only when a thin cord strikes the ground between me and Toga that I realize it's the noise that a whip makes. It slithers like a serpent, drawing a line that separates us. My eyes trace it back to its owner, another woman, who's landing with the elegance of a cat. Controls it like it's another appendage of her body. The whip wraps around her waist and hangs on the end like a tail. She's wearing a sleek jumpsuit the same shade of black as my cape. Even her mask has a few similarities, such as the pointed ears on top, except hers are much broader. There's red-tinted goggles covering her eyes and a wide collar beneath her chin that she uses to hide her face. I don't recognize her as a hero. She could be underground and making her debut. This could be a simple misunderstanding from the way that this looks to an outsider. However, she could also be a villain, another accomplice of the anarchist and Toga, friend of yours. I question Toga but keep my eyes fixed on the newcomer in case she decides to make a move. I can't risk becoming distracted. Toga replies with an extremely hoarse voice, I thought she was with you. If this woman in black isn't working with Toga, then why is she intervening? The only plausible explanation is that she saw me beating on a naked woman and doesn't know the context. She must either be a new hero or a vigilante like myself. I open my mouth to explain the situation to her, but before I can, she's already unraveling the whip from her waist. The whip strikes like a viper, barely giving me the reaction time to avoid being struck. Wait, is all I manage to blurt out before the leather curves and laces my thigh, making me grit my teeth to hold back a grunt. The self-imposed heroine is a professional with the weapon. Not needing to rein it back in to maintain control, it swings up and wraps itself between my wrist and elbow. The whip goes taut. I'm sure she expects me to pull or be pulled. Rather than allow this to become a game of tug-of-war, I use the sharpened prongs on my vambrace to cut the line. The rope retracts, but its owner doesn't allow that to stop her assault. She closes the distance by rushing me. She opens with a flying kick aimed for my chest. Wait, no, it's a feint. Her other leg rotates with a fluent spiral motion of her body, bringing itself down from above. I can only block the strike, raising both my arms to shield my head. Then, all of her weight pushes me down to one knee, as she uses my arms as a launch pad. With amazing skill, she somersaults and gracefully sticks the landing. By the time that I've spun myself around to face her, she's already leading with another high kick. I step back and see that she has a pointed heel, the sharp tip coming too close for comfort. My teeth stay gritted, since the leg that I leaned all of my weight into is the one that she injured. Putting pressure on that leg gives her an opening to aim for it. Predictably, she tries. I parry it. She opts for punches now, jabbing at the air as I shift left or right to dodge them. Then, her fingers uncurl from fists, going for an open-palmed approach. It's not until too late that I see why. On the tips of her fingers, tiny claws poke through the seams of her gloves. The sharpened makeshift nails drag themselves across my pectorals, digging deeper into the 𝗳𝗓𝗓. I see through my teeth once they cut through, breaking skin and shredding flesh. Reflexively, I place a hand over the fresh scars. My glove becomes coated in the blood that's seeping out. To put it lightly, she scratched me, though I know it'll become scarred there for life. She's left her mark. I only have one arm to defend myself from her next swipe, so I don't give her an opening. I hop back a step and resort to only ducking or dodging. She's trying to close the distance so that she can use her claws. I reach into a compartment on my belt that stores smoke bombs. When I lean away from her next attack, that's when I throw the pellet down, leaping back and letting the smoke do its work. Some enemies blindly run through the smoke instead of avoiding it, so I stay on guard. That's the only reason why I'm able to dodge the whip that cuts through the cloud. The tip rebounds and nearly tags my shoulder. Because I cut it shorter earlier, it misses its mark on the third lash too. She's fast, already reining in her whip as she shifts the tide from long range to short range again. Her body twists and bends like it's boneless as she bounces over my head. Her agility is that of an acrobat or a gymnast. I have to constantly swerve or pivot on my strained leg to evade her kicks. This is like fighting a much more adept version of Toga. None of the attacks are sloppy, they all have a purpose. The claws retract as she goes for kicks only. I block with my elbow this time, swinging my arm out to shove her away, but she cartwheels backwards with the force instead of stumbling. The claws return. I know to lean back when she takes a swipe at my face. I'm beginning to sense a pattern in her moves as the fight progresses. It took a while to analyze the way that she alternates, but now I can read her properly. I'll wait for her to get in close again and use my taser. That comes at the cost of a kick to my shin first, but it's worth it for the trade-off of 20 volts. It's not enough to bring her down, but it does stun her momentarily. Instead of hitting her though, I just use one of my binding ties to string her up to a lamppost. If she's a fellow vigilante or a hero, I want to refrain from harming her. I said wait, let's talk this out. I can see her already struggling against the cable that's wrapped around her. The fight hasn't left her system yet. There's nothing to discuss. You are hurting. She looks in the direction of Toga before stopping mid-sentence. I take a glance too. Toga is gone. She must have slipped away during the fight, using it as a distraction. A murderer. I finish the sentence for her before she can jump to any conclusions on her own. Despite the goggles that hide her eyes and the mask that covers her face, I can still see the expression of doubt. That was Himiko Toga, a former member of the League of Villains. I just have to hope that she's aware of the villain organization. I can see the way that her body tenses when hearing that. She must have knowledge of them then. Oh no. Her demeanor changes to something somber. It matches the tone of her voice. I'm sorry. I didn't know. That must mean she believes me. Just when I'm about to lower and untie her from the restraints, I see the claws return. They slice through the cable like scissors cutting string. Once she's freed herself, she drops down into a crouch. I'm expecting an attack, but she simply stands up instead. I'm not sure how to respond or what to say, so I remain silent while she lets the adrenaline rush subside. In the meantime, her head tilts up and down, as though she's sizing me up. It takes a second to realize that's exactly what she's doing. In my defense, you don't exactly look like someone who saves cats out of trees. Her hand rests on her hip as she continues taking in my appearance. I grab a handful of the cloth hanging down from my shoulders, lifting it up to my jaw. This is meant to scare criminals. Then I drop the fabric of my cape once I'm finished putting an emphasis on it. So you're the broody type. Got it. She responds with a dismissive wave of the hand, before taking the other off of her hip and drawing it up to her chin, on second thought. Tall, dark, and handsome. I can work with that. The tip of her index finger taps her lip in feigned contemplation. We're wasting time. Having had enough with her attempt at playful banter, I take a few steps closer into her personal space. Are you underground? I get straight to the point. A pro, or vigilante, something like that. But she doesn't elaborate on which of the three is the one that she's answering. Let's not stray off topic though. She backs away to regain the gap that was between us earlier. What about you? Do you keep a license next to your taser? After a brief pause, her head tilts in an exaggerated pouting gesture that hurt by the way. I skip the apology and avoid the formalities. If she wants an answer as to who I am, then I'll give it to her. Depending on her reaction, I may be able to determine her own eligibility. I simply tell her I'm Batman. A shock must go through her system, showing on her face through the mask and goggles that she wears. Really, it's a ragged breath of disbelief that she draws, followed by a shake of the head. I thought you were just an urban legend. With the way things have been, I thought somebody made you up to try and scare away all the villains like All Might used to. I think that she's finally sobered up and willing to cooperate now, that she knows who I am, until she points at me incredulously and asks, wait, what part of you is supposed to be a bat? I open the split in my cape, just enough for her to see the symbol underneath, along with the 3 deep claw marks that she crossed it out with. Oops, is all she manages to squeak out as she shrinks in on herself. She bashfully glances up and down while shifting from foot to foot. It's a huge contrast to the skilled combatant that I was facing before. Sorry, she says while nervously chewing the bottom of her lip. Don't mention it, is all I say in response to whatever that entire display was. She must take that as an acceptance of her apology, because she immediately perks up afterwards. Then she does the unthinkable. She reaches for the goggles strapped around her mask, and begins pulling them off. I suppose I can make it up to you. The goggles drag her mask down with them, unveiling her face, by telling you who I am as well. And emerald green hair comes loose. Once I see her, I remember who she is. I understand completely. It all makes sense now. Tomoko Shirotoko, former and sole surviving member of the Wild Pussycats, stares at me with eyes as yellow as the light radiating from street lamps. The night that she lost her team, she had also lost her quirk. That explains why she's become a vigilante. That may also explain her reason for being here. Himiko Toga was a former member of the League of Villains, and those were the criminals responsible for her team's death. Their leader the one for the loss of her quirk. Of course, I should have known it was you for keeping the cat theme. I address that decision first. If she wants to keep her nightly activities a secret, then it'll be helpful to know why she took the risk of having people make that connection. It's also a way to let her know that I do, in fact, recognize her as a former pro hero. She hugs herself, avoiding making eye contact with me. She's either about to lie, or she's sensitive about the topic. Call me sentimental if you'd like. But I couldn't just leave them behind. The Pussycats are always going to be a part of me. Sensitive it is then. Still, aren't you doing this for them in the first place? I need to find out if she's hiding the reason why she's going after Himiko Toga. The difference between justice and revenge can mean all the difference for someone who's operating as a vigilante. I don't need to hear her breath hitch to see the hesitation. It's written in her body language. There's something she isn't comfortable sharing. I think she's about to lie, but then she raises her head, finally meeting my gaze. Like I said, they're a part of me. The cat is more or less my way of representing them. I carry them with me like they're still here. The look in her eyes is a familiar one. The resolve within the hidden vow in her voice is familiar too. She breaks eye contact again, muttering the next part, if that makes sense. It does. My voice is as low as hers. Yet, she hears what I said anyways, wide eyes returning to mine. I can see the unspoken question in her stare. I understand why she was so reserved when I seek the same answers. I think those questions are asked and the answers to them are given, though, to both of us. When her gaze lowers to my chest, to where the bat insignia is. Her head slowly tilts to the side in curiosity. Whatever she sees in me, she's taking an interest. She's studying me like I was studying her. I feel my own eyes narrowing as they search for the same thing that she seeks. There's nothing hostile about her stance or the way that she slowly starts approaching me, but there is something predatory about her eyes. Her hands start reaching up, towards my chest, towards the claw marks, her gloves that have sharp tips hidden with them. My own hands stop hers by the wrists. By the way that she flinches, she wasn't expecting the retaliation. Before she can think about struggling or trying to break free. Why are you investigating Himiko Toga? I remind her that we were speaking civilly and that we share a common enemy to fight instead of each other. Her shocked expression turns into a pout akin to childlike disappointment. Why are you? And she gives me an equally childish retort in response. I tighten my grip on her a little and force her to meet my glare. The frown deepens, but she gives in. Not without a scoff first. I'll tell you when you let go of me. Along with a demand, just in case she did intend to attack by getting close to me. I take a step back when releasing my hold. For extra measure, I also conceal myself with my cape, since the fabric should protect against most volatile substances or weapons. I don't let her off the hook with my glare though. It's a waiting stare, reminding her to hold up her end of the bargain. Toga was part of the group that killed my team, my friends, my family. There's a bitter bite to her words that I don't think is just animosity for Toga. This is a reminder of her own that I'm treading on a delicate subject. But that's not all. The League of Villains stole more than my quirk from me that day. Kota Izumi, Shino's nephew, was taken by one of their cruelest members. Her hands form into shaking fists as she refrains from shouting. Horrible killers took a little boy with them, never to be found. I can see her entire form quaking now. Her rage is getting the best of her. It may be insensitive to interrupt, but I know I have to intervene before the anger consumes her. You're still looking for him, aren't you? And I know that it works by the way that my question startles her. I successfully pulled her from her darker thoughts by reminding her she still believes that the boy is alive somehow. Yes, I can tell by the way the light glistens in the unshed tears of her eyes. She wants to save the people that she lost, and this is the only way that she knows how. There is no crying so long as she believes she can do it, so long as there's a glimmer of hope still. Give me a moment. I press down on the 𝐻𝐿ink slave to my cowl so that I can speak with Kurogiri, even though she'll obviously still hear me. I shift myself to the side so that I'm facing away from her. Not completely with my back to her, that would be perceptible to attack, but so that she knows I'm not going to be talking to her. Are you there? I'll be addressing Kurogiri instead. I've been here the entire time. Not to worry. I've already taken the liberty of researching Miss Toga and the other LOV affiliates a long time ago. Kurogiri is quick to assure me of his assistance in what was going to be requested of him. Even if we hadn't stumbled upon 𝗧𝗪𝗀, we would have had to research the enemy anyways. I can hear the rhythmic tapping of a keyboard in the background as he shares the intel. Fortunately for us, and unfortunately for Miss 𝗧𝗪𝗀, a majority of the League has either disbanded or been captured. All for one remains in Tartarus along with Tamura Shigaraki and more. This is all information that I already know. Give me something that will help. I chance a quick glance to see if 𝗧𝗪𝗀 is having a better time maintaining her patience than I am. She rests one hand on her hip while feigning interest in the claws of her other as though they're nails. When her head starts to turn towards me, I revert my gaze to avoid getting caught staring. Not without a long-winded sigh first, Kurogiri provides me with what I want. There happens to be one other former member of the League aside from Toga who managed to get out uncaptured. Shuichi Iguchi used to go by the alias Spinner, now acts as a bodyguard for drug shipments at the docks. He quickly debriefs me of what he's found. How come I never made this connection myself or heard of him before? I have to wonder how Iguchi managed to stay under the radar for this long. I also ponder the potential reasons why Toga hadn't sought him out herself while I'm at it. Perhaps you've heard of him by his new alias, Killer Croc. I believe he's changed quite a lot since his days as a member of the League. Do be careful, sir. And that explains it. Killer Croc was the result of nomification and trigger testing. He was no longer a man with a reptilian quirk. He'd been turned into an apex predator far more lethal than originally. I disconnect the line when I take my finger off the 𝗻𝐿ink and face towards 𝗧𝗪𝗀 again. Her hand still rests against her hip, but she's giving me her full attention now, a smirk on her face. Was that the wife? Girlfriend? It's an attempt at playfully teasing me, but I know what I'm about to tell her will quickly change that mood. I have a lead, and I was right since that's all it took for her posture to turn serious. Toga wasn't your only shot at finding Kota Izumi. I've tracked down another former member of the League. He used to go by Spinner, but now he's called Killer Croc. He may have answers. 𝗧𝗪𝗀 is already pulling the goggles of her mask back over her face. That's quite the lead, and I can hear the eager tone in her voice. Looks like I owe you one. But I step in front of her before she can run off to go after Killer Croc alone. I'm coming with you. I see her open her mouth to protest but talk over her before she gets the chance. He has ties to Toga and I'm investigating her. Remember, I don't think that she would appreciate me tacking on that. The other reason I'd like to tag along is because I'm concerned about her holding her own against 𝐻𝗂𝐿. But that goes unsaid when she looks me up and down. She can see how tense I am, and since it is protective, I'm sure whatever reluctance she has dies on the tip of her tongue and comes out as a sigh instead. Fine, but there's no disappointment in her tone either. She purposefully brushes against me when walking by, leaning into the cloth that hangs down from my shoulders, the bat and the cat taking on the crocodile. I feel her warmth against my side and hear the low purr in her voice. I wonder how this is going to go. It's strange, different, to be navigating the night with somebody else and not alone, especially somebody who seems to know every crevice just as well as I do. Feels unnatural. Yet here we are, a cat that lands on her feet with every leap and bound. Meanwhile, I am a bat, gliding above her just out of reach, as though she could swat me out of the air in the event that I get too close. It's odd not being grounded. I'm used to perching myself on a rooftop or a gargoyle. With her though, there's never a pause. It's a constant chase. What we're chasing isn't each other. What we're chasing is justice. From above, I see the vast stretch of ocean beyond the city first. The concrete comes to an end, met by a wooden harbor creating the divide between land and sea. It's all coated in a blue hue. The night sky from which I roam covers it all. I see 𝗧𝗪𝗪 waving for me to come down. She's finally spotted the dockside as well. It's a silent descent. I want to land just as gracefully as she does. My boots should scrape against the roof, but they don't. My cape closes around me once my flight is over. It drags behind me now, waiting for the next time it can be free. 𝗧𝗪𝗪 presses her index finger to her lips, indicating that it was right of me to take the silent approach and that I should continue to do so. The hand she's using then juts out her thumb to point behind her. I follow the direction of it and see that we've landed on an old-fashioned building. This is one with a trapdoor roof hatch for maintenance. Newer buildings, burglar-proof, don't have those. I give her a nod of approval before peering over the ledge of the building we're on. There's nobody guarding the front entrance nor patrolling. The soft click of the hatch opening makes me pull away and rejoin 𝗧𝗪𝗪. It's the hatch that I'm peering over the ledge of now. The first 3 stories of the building are taken up by one big room, storage for outdated construction equipment, cargo containers, most likely holding not-so-outdated drugs or weapons. I follow 𝗧𝗪𝗪 through the hatch and we're already blending into the shadows. It's easy with how many are being cast by stacked crates. There's lots of corners to hide, and in tall places to keep out of sight. We're able to stealthily move through the place undetected. Not that there's any guards to worry about in the first place, unless my eyes deceive me. There doesn't happen to be any security cameras either. I realize why the security is so lax far too late. Steel screeches upon being lifted so suddenly. I'm already throwing myself aside, landing on my right shoulder, and rolling as the steel container I heard is just a millisecond from slamming into me. I catch a glimpse of what threw it in my peripheral vision, but don't stop for a good look. Instead, I'm throwing myself behind an old backhoe next. I see across from me that 𝗧𝗪𝗪 also took cover. She'd climbed a scaffolding and hidden herself there, it seems. I wonder if she actually got there unspotted or not. A guttural sound worse than the earlier screech of steel comes from the direction of our assaulter. It's only after the noise drags itself out that I realize it's a voice, or what's as far from a voice as something could sound. 𝗂𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙 louder, which means whatever is speaking is getting closer. Claws tear the engine cover off the old backhoe, ripping the engine apart simultaneously. The scaled hand those sharpened appendages belong to is big enough to grip my entire head, and that's what would have happened had I not clambered to the rear of the machine. As I said earlier, I realized why the security is lax far too late. Killer Croc, the monster we came here looking for, is essentially a guard dog. Croc is the security himself. I'm jumping from the backhoe to a different piece of construction equipment before the beast can swat me. Not before I can leave behind a parting gift, however. A smoke bomb. It explodes directly beneath Killer Croc, shrouding the behemoth in a thick darkened fog and giving me the perfect cover to get away. Or so I thought. Killer Croc comes barreling through the smoke, somehow knowing exactly where to strike. I just barely managed to avoid losing my leg to the beast's belly by twisting it at the last second. Again, too late. Too late to decipher the meaning of what Killer Croc had said earlier. I thought I smelled someone, is what he had meant to say. That's how he found me in Shire Toko. That's why the smoke didn't faze him. Croc caught my scent, which means there's no losing him. I stop evading him and resort to my only other option. I'll have to fight this abomination. What was once 𝐒𝐝𝐵𝗿𝐺𝐻 now stands at 11 feet as a nomification. What resembles the shape of a muscular man akin to the size of what 𝐼𝐧𝐿 himself used to be is covered in a thick scaly hide. 𝐒𝐻's body has been mutated into grotesque proportions, and the reptilian appearance that originated from his quirk has increased. All that resembles the way he originally looked is the desaturated purple hair that hangs down from his head to his shoulders. I wait, not allowing myself to tense, as what's no longer human charges me. Then I slip aside at the last possible moment, driving a knee under Croc's ribcage. It digs into hard muscle and slams his innards. Croc unleashes an animalistic response, swiping at me with a thick arm like it's a tail. I let the attack knock me over and roll onto my back. It's there I can grip one of Croc's legs and propel him over me by using his own force against him. Croc flips over onto his back as well, with a thump that shakes the whole building. It's from the floor that Killer Croc takes a deep snarling gulp of air, which makes his muscles swell with fury. I've angered him. I'm already on my feet within the next instant, but so is he. The man-turned monster has its teeth bared, eyes bugged, and fists clenched. Killer Croc roars so loudly that the windows rattle. He charges. I feint left, then dodge right when he goes for the feint. I grab the arm that's as thick as a log which had been used to knock me over earlier, twisting it and using momentum against him. Then I attempt to throw him with all my strength, a classic judo move meant to flip Croc over and onto his back. Except, Croc weighs too much. Earlier, I had the power behind his own attack to use as a means to move him. Now, with my own strength, it isn't enough. It's then that Croc catches me square in the chest, so hard that I can feel my armor crack. Opacity splashes across my senses like black paint over a window, blotting out the light. I think I'm going to die. That thought gets blotted out too. Through the haze, I hear 𝗧𝗵𝗃 screaming desperately, "No!" The sharp snap of her whip catches Croc on the wrist, making him yank away from it, and me by extension. Her heel catches him by the jaw once she performs a flying kick from the scaffolding. Then, her midair maneuver ends with a somersault, allowing her to stick the landing. She's positioned herself in front of me, protectively. Oh, I'm still conscious. I'm still alive. I'm sprawled out across the floor, flat on my back. Just trying to sit up lights up my body like a strong electric current. I can taste the iron from my own blood. I can't be out of commission like this. 𝗧𝗵𝗃 needs me. I hear her grunts of effort as she uses gymnastics to avoid being grabbed by Killer Croc. That can only go on for so long. Either Croc will eventually get lucky or she'll tire out. Whichever way, she can't beat him alone. I reach into a pouch on my utility belt, specifically selecting the one that holds a taser. It has a basic stun setting, but I dial it up for quirks that can take it. My arm is shaky and my vision is still blurred from the blow Croc gave me, but I force myself to work through the pain and aim. This is all I can do to help 𝗧𝗵𝗃 for now. The electric wires hit their mark and a blue flash indicates Croc is being shocked before his guttural roar. 𝗧𝗵𝗃 seizes the opportunity to wrap her whip around one of Croc's ankles and leans back with all of her weight. With the electric discharge putting him off balance, it's enough to make the behemoth stumble. She then leaps high and delivers a flying kick to his head. Her aerial assault continues with a second foot to the skull. Then Croc falls to one knee. 𝗧𝗵𝗃 brings a knee up into his jaw and lands a strike to his solar plexus. He's dazed, but not finished. I force myself to roll over and use my elbow as a crutch. I need to get back up in case she needs me. All I manage for now is a crawl, but the flow of adrenaline is slowly returning and that'll be enough to get me on my feet again. 𝗧𝗵𝗃 notices my struggle with a glance over her shoulder, but doesn't show any visible concern. Let the woman do all the work? Ha, typical men. Her tone betrays her joke and demeanor though. You seem to handle it well on your own. I return her quip with my own attempt at humor to put her worries to rest. She juts a thumb at Croc. Taking this big guy down wasn't easy, you know. By this point, I'm finally able to stand again. However, I conceal my body with my cape. I don't want her to see the way that my body trembles from the pain. I don't want her seeing my broken body armor. I'm sure he bleeds just like the rest of us. I aim my response at Croc as a threat so that he'll acknowledge us. Do you think he'll even understand us? 𝗧𝗵𝗃 places a hand on her hip as she stares at me with skepticism. I draw a bat-shaped shuriken from my utility belt and use it as a blade to stab Croc's shoulder. He'll understand this. And Croc's sharp intake confirms it. Where's Himiko Toga? So I take that as a sign to begin the interrogation. Croc seethes through his jagged and pointed teeth. 𝐾𝐩𝐢𝐳. I dig the blade deeper into his shoulder so that he knows that isn't the answer I'm looking for. Red predatory eyes glare defiantly back into my own. 𝗧𝗵𝗃 takes a step towards us. Maybe we should, but redirecting my glare from Croc to her is enough to stop her in her tracks. She holds up her hands to let me know that she won't interfere. That doesn't prevent her from asking questions when I pull a syringe from a belt pouch though. What's that? Chemical sodium pentothal. I multitask by giving Croc the injection as I simultaneously respond to her. I don't have to bother glancing back in her direction to know she's got a perturbed expression on her face. It'll make him more compliant when answering questions. So I tell her all that she'll need to know in a simplified explanation. Oh, it's truth serum. Why didn't you just say so? I ignore her witty remark and return to interrogating Croc. Now, tell me, where is Himiko Toga? I ask it one last time. For a mind that's been scrambled and toyed with like 𝐒𝐽𝐺, the drug ought to work. I doubt he'll be able to overpower it. I doubt he'd been able to even before the experimentation. The next growl from Killer Croc is submissive. Fukuoka. His deep voice is slurred and he pauses in a futile attempt to hold back from giving me what I want. 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗿𝗺. But the drug wins in the end. Did you understand a word that he just said? Shirotoko cocks her head like a cat expecting either a treat or a toy. I suppose what I've got for her is a bit of both. It sounds like Toga is hiding in an abandoned blood bank near Fukuoka. I should be able to pinpoint where exactly once I search the addresses of blood banks in that area. Just then a gleam of light strikes my eyes. I tense up and expect an attack, but discover the source is coming from a window. I don't lower my guard at first, assuming it belongs to a car's headlights, but then realize it's the sun rising that nearly blinded me. It'll have to wait for tomorrow. I return my gaze to Shirotoko and see her pouting. Do you have a bat quirk that makes you nocturnal or something? She crosses her arms. Her incredulous tilt of the head doesn't match her teasing smirk. She's hard to read with all of her contradictions. Is she upset or is this all still just a joke to her? That's my secret. I won't allow her to allure or trick me though. I can't show any signs of weakness more than I already have. I can't let anyone figure out that Batman is quirkless. That's not your only one. She winks with a parting shot before using her whip to latch onto a beam. Then, like a grappling line, the whip helps her ascend towards the ceiling. I wait a short while after that to make sure she's actually gone before activating the 𝐻𝐿ink in my cowl. Kurogiri, could you give me an exit? I'm mid-question when he opens a warp gate for me. I'll prepare your usual breakfast. Comes the first half of his response through my earpiece. The second half I hear in person once I step through the portal and into my base of operations: toast, coffee, painkillers, and bandages. I've felt this pain. I've seen this before. The warmth of a clouded blanket muddled by the color of wet ash above me. And at the center of it is a falling bat. The creature that has lost its flight lands between my mother and father. It crashes into a puddle with a dark reflection. The gleam of a gun barrel mistaken for the pale moonlight. The only time a light in the dark isn't comforting. The bat screeches. It cries in agony as its ears flutter instead of its wings. The explosion of sound from the gun accompanies a deafening boom of thunder. Then red descends upon the earth. The rain drowns the bat in its puddle of blood. It tries to swim. It tries to scream. It can no longer fly. It waits to be saved by some hero. It's small enough to be plucked from its hell and nursed back to health so that it can fly again. Except no hero ever comes. When I wake up, part of me wonders if I'm still in that nightmare. My body aches like the fallen bats. The sound of rain pattering against the window makes me flinch more than the cold nipping at me despite being covered by a heavy set of blankets. A ceiling as blue as midnight is the unreachable night sky. Am I alive or am I dead? Am I home or am I in that dark alley again? I lay here waiting for an answer. I lay here waiting for a hero that will never come. Who am I waiting for? Kurogiri. I notice the purple wisp of smoke that strikes the cool air, the fog of this night, that eventually forms a full warp gate. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment. I recognize it as a sign of his arrival. I don't have the heart to tell him he's too late. That too had gone cold long ago. I try asking him how long I've been asleep instead, but my words slur and the sound that escapes is a groan. Kurogiri's eyes bend in sympathy, his unique way of wincing without a face. I don't want his pity. He knows this, and doesn't express any verbally because of that. Still, his expressions are a dead giveaway, even without a face. I find myself pondering whether you or your cars will come back in better condition sometimes. He tries covering his concern with a joke that falls flat. If I laughed, it'd probably have come out as a cough anyways. I'm afraid both are going to be worse for wear today. You're being called to attend a press conference to assess the fallout of the All-Might Museum. He shrugs before coming to my bedside with a fresh set of bandages to replace the old ones. All I can do to protest is grunt in complaint. It's not like trying to argue would get me out of attending the conference or having my bandages changed regardless. Forcing myself to talk is better reserved for more significant topics. How long have I been asleep? So I manage to ask the question that I actually want answered. Not long enough. Kurogiri huffs before giving me an actual answer. 6 hours. I expected to be unconscious for longer than 6 hours. I've slept for entire days sometimes. I was certain that I'd be recovering at least until next nightfall after such a blow from Shuichi Iguchi. He really had been turned into a Killer Croc. Then again, I've survived hits just as strong before and endured even worse for far longer. I don't bother asking Kurogiri what sort of treatment he gave me. I know I'm in the best of care and that I'll be on my feet again despite the current tremors of pain that my body is giving off. Considering what I promised Shirotoko, I got lucky. I'd worry about my luck running out one of these nights at this rate. But that's what Kurogiri is for. He tuts as he dabs my chest with a bacitracin-soaked cotton ball. It stings, and I wince or flinch a few times, but that's no different from the times I've been cut or shot. Once he's finished cleaning my wounds, he starts to apply the new gauze. If you're incapable of walking or speaking, then we may need to reconsider the press conference. He tugs the wrap around my chest so that I grit my teeth instead of retorting as he adds, perhaps you'll have a good night's sleep for once. I'll be fine. I force myself not to groan as I shift to get up and push Kurogiri's tentative hands away. He hesitates before helping me stand, watching my knees buckle and almost give. I don't need to see a mouth through the purple mist that makes up his face to know he's preparing to say something snarky. Luckily, there's nothing concealing my own expression so that I'm able to simply glare instead of having to say anything in order to prevent that. I notice him swap my white dress shirt with a red one though, to hide the blood if it starts coming through my bandages, no doubt. I resist rolling my eyes. As logical of a decision as it is, it's also a silent jab at me for going through with this while still recovering. When it comes to breakfast, he's much less subtle with his jesting. I have to rub my eyes to make sure I'm seeing properly. There's nothing but painkillers on the tray he carries out. He even went through the trouble of covering it with a lid in order to have a grand reveal. Knowing it's going to be a long morning, I close my eyes during the car ride back to the museum. That was a mistake. I fall asleep and give him another opportunity to poke fun at me. The teasing is merciless and never ending until he drops me off. I'm actually relieved once I step foot out of the car and into the frenzy of reporters. I'd rather they bombard me with questions than comment about the way I lean way too much on one side. It's a lot easier to fake a smile through the pain when they don't even know about it. I put my arm around a few of them in order to rely on their body as a way to hold me up, and all they think is that I'm being friendly or that I'm posing for the cameras. At least I won't have to worry about the man in red or some other criminal crashing this press conference. From the looks of it, they upped security to a ridiculous level. 𝗵𝗲 himself is busy being interviewed and surrounded by paparazzi as well. Red Riot and Dynamite. 𝐒𝐽𝐻 is here. I'd almost forgotten about 𝐒𝐽𝐻. The brash blonde had been my childhood friend before. I hadn't seen him since I left for America. Not even when I came back. All these years have passed and we never once had a reunion. I wonder if he's changed. I wonder if he even remembers me. I wonder if he'll notice whether or not I've changed. I don't want to take any chances. If anyone is capable of seeing through my public persona or comparing my past self with my present self, it'd be him. I'm fairly certain that he didn't notice me yet like I spotted him. All I have to do is slip back into the crowd and there's no chances of us running into one another. Mr. Midoriya. The sharp jolt of pain that comes from a hand touching my shoulder stops my instincts from reflexively reacting defensively when I'm snuck up on from behind. I turn around to see who's seeking my attention. The woman behind me retracting her hand like she just startled a dog. I internally curse myself for being so easily distracted that she could surprise me. I just hope she didn't realize that all it took to cause me harm was a soft tap on the shoulder. To make matters worse, I recognize her now. She's a pro hero too. I just didn't realize sooner since she isn't wearing her uniform. The scarlet maxi dress does happen to be the same color as her hero costume though. The other giveaway to her identity is the iconic spiked ponytail that's come to influence women's hairstyles all over Japan. That's me. I make an attempt to hide the lingering pain in my shoulder by flashing a toothy smile. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but you wouldn't happen to be the heroine creative, would you? She returns my smile with one of her own, minus the teeth. Momo Yaoyorozu when I'm off duty. She sounds relieved. My mind runs through all the possibilities as to why. She could be relieved that I recognize her. Perhaps she thought I wouldn't be friendly. It may be wishful thinking that the real reason is she's fooled by my smile and thinks she mistook my earlier reaction. Does that mean you wouldn't stop me if I did something naughty? She blushes and avoids eye contact, but her smile doesn't falter. It's safe to assume she isn't uncomfortable with my flirting, but she missed my real message. People in her profession can't afford the luxury of taking time off, even if she does happen to come from a wealthy family. She doesn't seem like the type that'll respond to bold, flirtatious comments. So I turn it down a notch. So, to what do I owe the pleasure? Did you just happen to notice our matching colors? I gesture between our red apparel with a forced laugh. I don't need to be in physical pain to ooze suffering in my tone. It had to be one of the cringiest lines I've come up with. Yaoyorozu laughs along regardless. I can't tell if it's a mercy chuckle or if I should lose all respect for her to actually find that joke funny. Regardless, she waves off my joke as the reason for her approach with her hand. Actually, this is more of a business-related request. She hands me a card that isn't her own as she explains. A close friend of mine runs a talk show and she was hoping to have you appear as a guest for an exclusive interview. I skim the card's credentials and get hit by another wave of realization. The talk show host Yaoyorozu is referring to as Kyokajiru. She too is a pro hero. They both graduated from UA, so it's no surprise that they'd be close. She really appreciates what you're doing for All Might, we all do, but she'd really like to give you an opportunity to promote your cause. I glance up from reading to see Ieyasu rambling more than I used to as a kid. In return, I'd be willing to pitch in by funding it. I can join as a sponsor if you'd like. I know you're already financially standing, but I think you'd benefit from my backing as well. Say no more. I cut her off while pocketing the card she gave me. Consider it done. How could I refuse such a gorgeous girl? Ieyasu blushes again, as expected. What isn't expected is that she actually responds to the flirting this time. Are you just going to keep hitting on me? She asks. I tilt my head as though I'm considering it. Maybe I actually am, to some extent. Would that be a good thing or a bad thing? I trade my sly tongue for a sly smile. She has an equally mischievous side that shines through. It dwells within the glint of her eye as she replies, I'm still deciding. Well, I meet her gaze. You let me know when you decide. She bites the bottom of her lip, preventing herself from making that choice right here and now. Judging by the look in her eyes, that decision may have already been made regardless. Deku, a different kind of jolt goes through my body when I'm caught off guard a second time. Ieyasu is broken from her trance and looks just as surprised as I am by the sudden arrival of Katsuki Bakugo. Kaken and Red Riot stand side by side across from me and her. I let the tension fall with my shoulders before it gets any heavier and resort to using my fake smile again. I hadn't heard that nickname in a long time, Kaken. I notice he jolts the same way I did when he hears the familiarity of what I used to call him. Deku. Red Riot glances between me and Bakugo before landing on Bakugo. The confusion in his expression remains in the top half where he raises his eyebrows, but a playful smirk finds itself on the lower portion of his face. Kaken. The inquisitiveness in his tone has a teasing edge now. Do you two know one another? Ieyasu chimes in with her own confused curiosity as she glances between me and Bakugo as well. Kaken recollects his composure with an annoyed frown. TCH. The nerd and I used to live on the same block. He glares at them from the corner of his eye as he adds, not that it's any of your damned business. Red Riot laughs it off, holding up his hands in mock surrender. Ieyasu, however, takes a step back and bows apologetically. I didn't mean to impose. She then turns to me. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Midoriya. I hope to see you again. The feeling is mutual. I wave her farewell before returning my attention to Kaken and Red Riot. The spiky-haired redhead sheepishly rubs the back of his neck before extending that same hand for a handshake. Sorry about Katsuki scaring off your girlfriend. As if the nerd would land her, Kaken interjects. I'm Ijiro Kirishima. He ignores Bakugo as he continues his introduction, but you may know me better as Red Riot. I shake Kirishima's hand while returning the favor. A pleasure to meet you. Of course I've followed your exploits. I had no idea that Katsuki used to be friends with somebody else before UA. Kirishima flashes a shark-toothed grin as he teases Kaken. I didn't think anyone other than I would have put up with his explosive personality back then. Kaken's eye twitches in aggravation before he snaps. The fuck did you say, shitty hair? I had tons of friends, but the bark has no real bite to it. Seeing how he's still the same hot-tempered kid is a relief. I wouldn't have wished a transformation on him like my own. Actually, Kirishima, he's right. Kaken was pretty popular on the playground. Seeing him now brings me back to a time I'd long forgotten. A better time. Really, Kirishima laughs like I just told him a joke. Except, he's quick to lose whatever humor he heard. A sheepish smile barely hangs on. Katsuki didn't really share much about his past. For a moment it looks like he's giving me a sympathetic stare, but he then turns it on Kaken. I try to gauge a reaction out of him, but all he does is huff in response. His eyes briefly meet mine, but he doesn't maintain contact. The downtrodden atmosphere created by his sagging shoulders and the loss of his usual personality is off-putting to say the least. I realize the reason for the sudden change in his demeanor before he even explains himself though. I heard about what happened to Auntie Inko and Uncle Hisashi. I'm sorry, 𝗧𝗵𝗲. I neglected that the loss of my parents also meant the loss of his childhood friend. That night forever changed his life as well apparently. He wasn't even willing to share it with the new friends he had made when moving on. I force another fake smile, trying to make the mood revert to its prior tone. That happened a long time ago, Kaken. I even go as far as gesturing to the scenery of the museum to flaunt my inheritance. As you can see, I got over it. I'm facing away from him on that last part. I don't think I can maintain the facade and keep a straight face saying that, so I don't take the risk of letting him see my expression. When I recuperate and put the fake smile back on, I allow myself to face him again. Kaken has anything but a smile. He's grinding his teeth with a fire burning within the red of his eyes. I'm a bit startled by his angry aura, realizing it's noticeably different from the usual kind. He's not annoyed or aggravated. He's genuinely enraged. What I said made him furious with me. That's a relief. He really is the same old Kaken. That makes it much easier to keep a smile on my face. Thank you, Katsuki. You fucking prick. He grabs me by the collar of my shirt with a snarl. For a moment, I'm expecting a right hook. That'd be another blast from the past. 𝗵𝘃𝗲, calm down. Kirishima is quick to insert himself between us though. Though he looks reluctant, Kaken does back off. Smug bastard. Even if your quirkless weak ass couldn't save them. Now I know why you didn't even fucking try. He assaults me with words instead. They admittedly hurt more than a punch would have. Katsuki. Kirishima looks appalled by what his friend said. He knows better than to expect Kaken to apologize for it though. Instead, he tries bowing on Katsuki's behalf. I'm so sorry, Midoriya. Don't fucking speak for me. Kaken prevents Kirishima from apologizing by hoisting him up from his bowed position, forcing him to stand straight. I mean every word. You're just as every bit useless as you were back then. You're a coward and a loser. No wonder you gave up on your dream to become a hero. You couldn't even save your parents. He continues his barrage in his fit of rage. For all he knows, I deserve every word. Every strike leaves a wound worse than the ones covering my body. Come on, that isn't fair. He was just a kid and he's got no quirk. He couldn't have done anything even if he wanted. Kirishima continues trying to defend me but gets shoved aside. Kaken gets right in my face as he spits. Doesn't fucking matter. It's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you. My breathing stills as he locks eyes with me. It's like he's looking past my mask and staring into my soul now. He too freezes. The red of his eyes lose their heat as they widen. I'm about to say something. Anything to lead him astray from whatever it is that he's seeing. Except, Kirishima beats me to it. The spiky redhead grabs Kaken by the shoulder and pulls him back from my personal space. That's enough. He hisses right into Kaken's ear before directing his attention to me. We've bothered you long enough. I apologize again for the trouble. That's all right, is all I managed to choke out in response. Not because of hurt pride or wounded feelings. I'm just not recovered from the gaze into my soul just now. He'd found and exploited a weakness that I wasn't prepared to hide or defend. 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Kaken slaps Kirishima's hand off his shoulder. The fight seems to have left his system though, since he's allowing the fellow pro hero to lead him away from me. Not without a parting shot though. The Deku I knew died in the same alley as his parents that night. As I watch my childhood friend leave, I can't help but agree with him, muttering under my breath, he's not wrong. I don't know about that. He took it pretty far. This day is just full of surprises. I turn around to see who else has managed to ambush me undetected. A familiar head of blonde hair approaches me. Miss Shield. I'm grateful that she wears glasses so that there's a barrier between her eyes and my own. I'm not sure I want her to see the emotion that dwells within my eyes right now. Rough night. She tries to lighten the mood with a forced laugh. I'm a tad bit grateful for the effort, so I pretend to chuckle. You look like you could use a friend right about now. She then takes my hand in her own. She's probably just trying to console me, but the action makes me look at her inquisitively. She stares back. I'm grateful for her again. Her gaze isn't the prying type. I could probably use more than a friend right now. I attempt to joke too, except the physical contact and the held stare does something other than make it funny. The smile Shield has is an amused kind, but not humored. You only had to say so. An angel falls from grace. Its wings blackened. Its feathers plucked to bare darkened skin. It looks like a demon now. A horrific creature casted into the night and abandoned to what lay below. A bat that cries out at the sky that betrayed it. When it hits the pavement below, it tastes what mortals feel every day. Blood taints its tongue until it can longer shriek. The bat's bones are broken beyond healing. So it folds in on itself, wrapping its weak body in its leather wings. Despite the pain tonight, it oddly doesn't feel so alone. Wrapped in its wings is another. Something else is with it. Someone lays there with it, taking mercy, waiting for it to die before leaving it like the rest. Someone. I wake up without that cold comfort. Instead, there's somebody warm snuggled up against me. I feel the heat of the shared space and not the chill of the night. My arms are wrapped around her, like that broken bat's wings. The bed beneath us is soft unlike the rough pavement that I remember. She breathes softly as she sleeps, not like the ragged dying gasps that the bat clung onto. It takes me a moment to realize that the woman beside me is Melissa Shield and that I'm not still stuck in that strange dream. Carefully, so that I don't accidentally wake her, I slip out of bed. She moans, but otherwise isn't disturbed by my sudden absence. When my eyes adjust to the lightless room, I'm relieved that it's my own. Having to sneak out of her house would have made things more complicated. Despite the night that I shared with Shield just now, I still have a date with Shirotoko. The night is still young. It's time for the fallen demon to rise. Now is when that bat takes flight again despite its broken wings. I step lightly so that the floorboards don't creak and leave the door open just a smidge so the lock won't click. Then I follow the familiar hallways of the manor. At the end is a grandfather clock that marks the haunting hour. It hides the entrance to the cave. Behind the time is a timeless crusade. Underneath the persona of Izuku Midoriya that lives in this mansion is the Batman. I pause mid-stride when I hear Kurogiri clearing his throat, no doubt to gain my attention. He was waiting for me like a parent catching their child sneaking out. He even folds his arms across his chest in disappointment. And just where do you think you're going? He asks regardless of already knowing the answer. I have to find Toga and her accomplice. I place my hand on the scanner. That's the first of many security measures. Then follow up with the retinal scan. 𝗧𝗏𝗄 won't be able to handle it alone. And enter the digits of the number code. I beg to differ. She seems like a more than capable girl. Kurogiri uncrosses his arms so that he can grab one of my own. She wasn't the one who got thrashed around by an animal. All it takes is a soft squeeze to the tender flesh, and the nerve flares up. Point taken. I see through my teeth before pushing his hand away from the sore spot. Even so, I made a promise. What's inside the glass case slowly rising from the ground is a constant reminder of that vow, and I intend to keep it. Kurogiri sighs, knowing that the promise I'm referring to isn't the one I made to 𝗧𝗏𝗄, but rather the vow made on my parents' graves. He's the only one who will ever come close enough to understanding. So when he doesn't give up on trying to convince me not to go out tonight, he makes me sigh too. Miss Shield is a good girl. You should stay. He waits until I have my back to him to say, one night off won't make a difference. I won't let him off so easily. When I turn around to face him, I look him directly in the eyes. I narrow my gaze to be as slanted as his. He knows Batman is staring at him now and not Izuku Midoriya. He's the first to lose focus, his yellow slithers widening. One night always makes the difference. I walk away having won more than just the staring contest. The only downside is that I have to travel to the blood bank myself. Kurogiri is petty enough not to open a warp gate. He's also not on comms. I'm going in as blind as a bat. I don't even see 𝗧𝗏𝗄 waiting for me. The rooftops are as vacant as the night sky. Not a star shines above me, nor does a cloud cast any shadows in the moonlight. I pick the lock on the skylight and descend without 𝗧𝗏𝗄. I can't take the chance of getting seen by Toga while waiting for her. There is a nagging feeling in the back of my mind though. I'm concerned as to why she isn't here. She has a personal motive to be interested in this case. I would have expected her to arrive early if anything. The rows of empty vials and beakers stretch in aisles, like a library without its books. The shelves stack on top of each other, glasses in between. Not a speck of blood is collected. It's a relief to see none of it is spilled either. I don't want to find any victims, but I'm partially expecting that outcome. Considering 𝗧𝗏𝗄's concerns for Kota Izumi, it's probably for the best that she isn't here, with that possibility lingering in the air. I find the staff room beyond the rows of nothing. The door is missing a handle, but it stays shut. It feels foreboding. I'm sure I won't like what's on the other side. When I push it open, I expect to find a corpse or Himiko Toga herself. There's nobody though, not a soul in sight. Even when I flick the light switch, I don't find anyone hiding in the shadows. There is a television monitor stationed at a table though. Wires run to outlets and extension cords are plugged into those. There's a remote with a piece of paper taped to it, placed atop the set. So that's how it is. I'm willing to bet the letter is addressed to me or 𝗧𝗏𝗄. When I rip the tape off and unfold it by its creases, my suspicions are confirmed. To the Batman, the handwriting is horrendous. As crazy and childish as Toga is, I guess I wouldn't put it past her. Except at the bottom of the page, it reads, from Anarchy. Unless she's calling herself by some sort of codename now, I'm willing to bet Anarchy is the man in red who she's working with. It's odd that he would have misspelled Anarchy though. He seemed competent enough from his introduction to be the mastermind behind whatever these two are up to. Unless Toga wrote it for him. I fold the paper smaller again so that it can fit into one of my spare utility belt pouches. There's a chance that I can get some sort of information from it based on the handwriting. Or even find fingerprints if I'm lucky. Now it's time to press play on the remote and see what kind of message these maniacs left for me. The monitor lights up, but all that it shows at first is static. It's grainy and barely readable. Then, it becomes clearer and less fuzzy. I'm shocked by what I see. It's no longer a mystery why 𝗧𝗏𝗄 isn't here with me. The former member of the Wild Pussycats is bound and gagged to a chair. She has a bruised cheek and her goggles are cracked. Behind her is Himiko Toga with a grin that would have rivaled All Might's. 𝗧𝗏𝗄 must have come here alone instead of waiting for me. Now she's captured and is being held hostage. Toga holds a knife to the hero-turned-vigilante's throat, staring into the camera. Hiya, B-man. She uses her free hand to wave. I found her kitty wandering around. 𝗧𝗏𝗄 tries to say something through the gag around her mouth, but it comes out as a muffled moan instead. Toga presses the blade closer to her neck, the threat making her stop. Let's cut to the chase. Shall we, Batman? A different voice cuts into the audio, this one filtered with its pitch and tune adjusted. I remember the modulated speaker from the museum. Anarchy steps into frame. I have something you want. In this harsh world we live in, we call that blackmail. Anarchy is still wearing the same golden face mask that conceals their identity, along with the long flowing crimson jacket and matching hat. They lean on a cane, as though they need it just to stay standing. You seem like you want to make a difference. Rejoice. I want to make a difference too. They sarcastically start. Then they take on a more serious tone. I'd like to propose an alliance. I think the two of us could accomplish great things together. I want to deny Anarchy's offer. I want to protest against his claims. Except, I have no choice but to hold back from verbally responding. This is just a recording. Nothing I say will matter. I can't refuse even if I want to. You keep cleaning up after everyone, Batman. And nobody is going to learn to take care of themselves. The ones that don't hate you will start to rely on you. They'll depend on you, like they did with All Might. We know what happened to him. We know how things will turn out. What if something happens to you? If you get old? What if you die? Then what? Their tone increases in aggression as they monologue. Do you not consider the world that revolves around you? You're a hypocrite, running around dispensing what you call justice, telling people what they can and can't do. Heroes, you're ensuring safety only provided it conforms to your twisted view. Whatever pleases hero society. That's it. You're not a hero. You're a despot. You don't enforce justice. You suppress it. I want to tune out all that they're saying, but I'd be lying if I didn't admit I've thought it all before myself. What they're pointing out about our hero society is true. The evidence exists with what happened to All Might. I agree with what they're saying is wrong. It's just how Anarchy intends to try and fix it that worries me. Well, in good faith, I'm going to show you an alternative tonight. They place a hand on 𝗧𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀's head, of course. You don't have much of a choice in the matter. However, I think you'll come around afterwards. I clench my hands into fists. Anarchy is using 𝗧𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀 as a hostage to blackmail me into doing whatever it is they want. The Yakuza has been around even before the dawn of quirks. Have you ever asked yourself why they weren't wiped out once heroes came into fruition? The police would have you believe it's because the Yakuza went into hiding, but, regardless of inactivity, heroes still chose to do nothing about them. Sir Night-Eye, the sidekick of the oh-so-great All Might, was aware of the Yakuza's whereabouts and their operations while still deciding to do nothing. They rant some more before nearly falling over and catching themselves with their cane like a crutch. They pause before regaining their composure and continuing. Would you like to know what heroes allowed them to get away with? A little girl named Eri was being experimented on. Her flesh was being fashioned into bullets. Her quirk was weaponized for the sake of their little game of heroes and villains. Ask yourself how a hero could allow such a thing to be done to a child. I don't want to believe what they're saying, but I have no reason to doubt them either. Many heroes were exposed as false idols, Endeavor being a prime candidate. Still, the horror of what Anarchy's saying right now is taking it too far, especially when considering Lemillion's connection with Night-Eye as his former mentor, and now being the #1 hero as the symbol of hope. If this is true and were to get out, it'd have disastrous consequences. Would you believe that after all this time, poor Eri is still being weaponized by the Yakuza? And that's the final nail in the coffin. If Lemillion knows about this now and still hasn't done anything, then he's no better. I think you know where I'm going with this. Unless you want your precious pet to get sliced up like Eri, I suggest you do what heroes are meant to do. Go rescue Eri from the Yakuza. Anarchy then gives me the ultimatum of deciding to take action. To be honest, Anarchy didn't have to take 𝗧𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀 captive to convince me into saving Eri. It was more so that I'd hear what they have to say. They wanted to win me over to their side so that I'd fight their cause for them. I won't lie that their words are convincing when they add, "She's an orphan." It's hard to imagine what that kind of trauma can do to a child. The ostentatious property is surrounded by a buffer of forested land. Encircling that is a wrought iron fence topped with spear points. A stronghold with as much security as this has something to hide. The thing about keeping secrets, the truth always comes out eventually. Like Anarchy told me about the girl being kept here by the Yakuza in plain sight, I'll expose the other evils hidden beyond those walls. I unlatch the grappling hook from my belt and use it to scale the wall. It gives me enough momentum to glide over the sharp security on top, my cape expanding like a bat's wings. Then the trees meant to hide the Yakuza's illegal activities hide me. High above the surface and covered by leaves, I move from branch to branch. The 𝗧𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀 compound is disguised as a collection of business office buildings beyond this point. However, not like the ones in America. It's decorated as a traditional Japanese residence, made from wood, upper floors and all. A large courtyard binds them together with a path of planks embedded within sand. A koi pond sinks into the ground directly at the center. They're trying too hard to look the part. I dart from the tree line to the nearest building. With no searchlights to spot me and no patrol, I then move along the walls until reaching the front door. It's a silent night, one quiet enough that if an alarm were to go off, the siren would surely be heard. I avoid stepping foot on the sand so I don't leave behind an impression. Then, all that's left is to pick the lock in order to get in. When the latch clicks open, I give it a gentle push. My first look inside the residence is of the front office. I silently thank God that there's no greeter stationed at it, then move swiftly to get deeper into the establishment. The interior is decorated like a generic Japanese office with empty cubicles creating workspaces. The inside matches the outside with nothing incriminating just yet. I have to look past the surface level. Literally, activating the lens in my cowl, my vision switches through varying ways to see. Night vision shows nothing and a blacklight filter shows very little. But infrared not only shows heat signatures in the shapes of bodies above me, but the thermal imaging displays the same below me. Unless there's a basement, that means there's more than meets the naked eye. Unless the wood is lined with lead, my X-ray setting should show me where to find the hidden passageway to access that lower level. I'm in luck. The entrance is behind one of the walls, a set of stairs leading down into a secret underground labyrinth hidden away. I knock on that section and hear that it's much hollower than the rest of the foundation. It doesn't easily slide aside when I try to move it forcibly though. I can't exactly say open sesame. My search for a hidden switch starts with looking behind paintings. All that's there are safes meant to be red herrings. There's nothing under the rugs either. I consider checking the cubicles and the desks, but they aren't numbered, and not marking the switch's location would be foolish. The search for a needle in a haystack isn't one that they'd inflict upon themselves. Eventually, I find the switch beneath a vase. Here goes nothing. The wall moves back before sliding into a pocket door. A staircase to hell awaits. Little do they know I've been there before. I descend into the underground base, prepared to find demons like myself waiting below. Inside, it's a maze of sharp angles and plenty of metal. Among the steel is glass and concrete. It doesn't fit with the naturally wooded place above it. As I walk through narrow corridors and stealthily turn corners, I begin to realize just how vast this network stretches. It's like a secondary sewer network without the pipeline. I'm fairly certain that it runs throughout the entire city. It contains several passageways that go on for what seems like miles. No doubt, this was purposely created with the intent of moving people in and out of the hideout in secret. They must have run human trafficking operations this way. The girl named 𝐒𝐽 is proof of that. There are multiple routes that make it easy to get lost if you don't know where you're going. It's meant to prevent an escape just as much as it's meant to disorient an outsider. There does happen to be a saving grace. Periodically, an iron door inserts itself into the rest of the metal. Those rooms are markers, or checkpoints in my case. What's in them varies so long as I don't go in circles. First, I find an infirmary. Professional-grade medical equipment is made easily accessible there. Next, I discover a meeting room. A round table with plenty of chairs. As I explore more and more, I know for certain that this is the true dwelling of the Yakuza and not the place built above it. They remind me of myself in that regard. I pause when opening the next door. There was an audible gasp from the other side. It could be an enemy, but it could also be 𝐒𝐽. I place a hand on the pouch of my utility belt that contains smoke pellets, just in case. Then I swing open the door. A girl no older than 13 cowers in the corner of the room, legs pulled up to her chest. She's not even on the mattress next to her, nor is she drawing any pictures to add to the collection taped all over the walls. It's a room that tells the story of a tragic childhood, one spent in isolation with very little. The sun never reached her down here. She was molded by the darkness. The filthy bandages wrapped around her arms and legs are more torn than the hospital gown she's wearing. Her hair is matted brown with dirt, overgrown and covering a tiny horn that sticks out from her forehead. I know I can be tall and intimidating, especially as Batman, so I crouch as the first step to showing her she's not the one who needs to be afraid. I take my hands off the utility belt concealed by my cape and hold them out for her to see there's nothing in them to harm her. Then I try and do what All Might would have done. I smile. I might not be capable of grinning eye to eye or showing my teeth, but a small smile ought to be enough to put her at ease. I'm here to help. I whisper so I don't attract any unwanted attention but keep my voice loud enough for her to hear as well. I'm going to get you out of here. There's no reason to be afraid. She starts to steadily crawl forward from her corner, reluctant to trust me. I don't blame her. After all that she's been through, I wouldn't expect any other reaction. She has a skeptical stare and a frightened facial expression still. Her tiny frame trembles, wanting to either go back to her corner or to give out. It's saddening to see what's become of her. She stops midway, flinching back and breaking eye contact. Her knees come back up to her chest and she refuses to look at me. What's wrong? I try to sound gentle when I ask her why she stopped halfway. She continues to shake, not budging in the slightest. All I can do is be patient and wait. Nothing good will come from being pushy and forcing her. I don't say anything and neither does she. We just take our time to get comfortable with one another's company. Only then will she trust me. She lifts her head and musters the courage to look at me again. Her voice wobbles as she says, "Why your ears are scary." It takes me a second to realize she's talking about the horns on the top of my head. The demonic visage definitely wasn't meant to be consoling for children. At least, that's not what I had in mind at the time. I try thinking about what the alternative could have been. It's not like bunny ears would have struck terror into the hearts of villains and criminals alike. I tilt my head in an attempt to make them seem not so imposing. They're meant to be. The corner of her mouth twitches before she mimics the fraction of a smile that I showed her earlier. Then the shielded body language lowers and she begins to crawl closer again. When her cherry red eyes move up and down, I can tell that she just wanted to get a better look at the horns by coming towards me. Her head tilts to the opposite side of mine as she changes her mind. I kinda like them. Well, I breathe a sigh of relief that she's no longer scared of my appearance. Good. I'm glad to hear that. What I'm not glad to hear is the sound of shoes slapping against sheet metal. We're no longer alone. I stand up, returning to my full height, and face the direction of the incoming person. I need to be intimidating again. Whoever I'm about to meet next isn't going to be like 𝐒𝐬𝐽. I'm going to have to scare them. I wrap myself in my cape and glower at the corner that the sound is coming from. What looks like a plague doctor shows themselves. They too wear a black cape that conceals their body. The bowler hat on the top of their head nearly falls off when they stumble back in surprise, having not expected to see me. WH, what the hell is this? They glance at 𝐒𝐬𝐽 in the doorway. What's going on? Suddenly, I feel compelled to answer them. The words rise up and climb out of my mouth like an uncontrollable urge to vomit. I'm here to rescue 𝐒𝐬𝐽 from you. It was like I was forced to tell the truth. Is that so? They compose themselves before adjusting their hat. And who exactly are you? Again, the words come out of my mouth involuntarily. I'm Batman, but it's clearly not what they were expecting as an answer. They take a step back, baffled and bewildered. Impossible. My quirk forces people to answer me truthfully when I ask a question. So that explains why I wasn't able to control my responses. Now tell me who you are. I might have lost control over the words coming out of my mouth, but I still have command over what my body does. I draw a bat-shaped shuriken while answering their question with the same answer. I am Batman. They pull out a handgun. I have no doubt that it's loaded with the quirk erasing bullets Anarchy mentioned. It doesn't have to be firing special shots from its chamber for me to know how dangerous it is though. Firearms are what murdered my parents. I know better than anyone that they can take a life. The bat-shaped shuriken I threw sinks into the plague doctor's wrist before they can get off a shot. They impulsively curse in pain, reflexively grabbing the wound with their other hand. That gives me an opening to close the distance and bring a knee up into their jaw. The mask splits from the impact, tearing open and sending the bowler hat flying. My elbow comes down on their now exposed head, knocking them unconscious. But the body hitting the floor with a thud isn't nearly as satisfying as the clatter of the gun landing somewhere on the ground with them. We need to go. I turn back to face 𝐒𝐬𝐽 and see that she's petrified in the doorway still. She was probably just scared to see me fighting one of her capturers, but I remind her that I'm not here to hurt her just in case. I'll make sure that none of them ever hurt you again. That makes her raise her head to look at me, at the very least. She has tears in her eyes as she nods. I take a few steps towards her, slower than I need to be, easing into her space. Can you move or do you need me to carry you? I try not to sound too demanding, but I need to know if she's going to be able to keep up and we're running out of time. When she raises her arms like a toddler gesturing to be picked up, I get my answer. In all honesty, it would have been better for me to have my hands free in case we run into more of the Yakuza, but I am the one who asked. Reluctantly, I scoop her up and begin to carry her towards the exit. For a moment, I actually think we're going to escape without any more trouble. We make it all the way back to the staircase without interference. If only I could have been as lucky as to make it the rest of the way undetected. Instead, I just had to run into a muscular man as large and wide as the room itself. I noticed the massive gauntlets with knuckle dusters that make up his fists. One punch even without those would be enough to put me in worse condition than the hit I took from Killer Croc. I figured he'd make for a difficult challenge regardless, his chest nearly ripping his tank top and his calves clinging tightly to his jeans. The plague mask looks like a luchador's with its unique design. This guy is the bane of my existence right now with how poor of a shape I'm in and the urgency I have trying to get 𝐒𝐬𝐽 out of here. Look what we have here. He towers over me as though he's made up of 20 men. 𝐒𝐬𝐽 buries her face into my shoulder, too scared to look. With my movements restricted by her, I only have one option. I'll be taking her back now. My one chance is when he reaches for me. Luckily, the size of his hand being the same as my body, it makes for an easy target. When he gets close enough, I pull out the syringes in my back belt pocket. Then I jab all 10 of them into his huge meaty palm. That's a heavy dosage of carfentanil that I just stuck him with. One needle is enough to bring down a single elephant or bear. This ought to be enough for him, regardless of his quirk's size enhancement. Wah, he turns his hand over to look at what I've done. I'm sure it didn't hurt, but he must be feeling the effects. Wanta yodo. The behemoth then begins to topple like a tree that's had its trunk chopped at the base. You know what they say. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. The earthquake from the Goliath's floor collision shakes the entire building's foundation, wood rattling in protest to the force trying to make it give. There's no way that went unnoticed or unheard. The average African bush elephant weighs 13,000 pounds. The sound of something close to being that heavy falling over is loud enough to be heard at a concert. As though proving my point, another member of the Yakuza leaps into the fray. He's much leaner than the one I just brought down. Chin-length golden locks are parted to the left, obscuring his right eye, and leaving the other almond-shaped iris to peer out at me by its lonesome. Just like my 2 encounters with his allies, he's wearing a beak-shaped plague mask too. Eri is still clinging onto one of my arms, limiting my ability to fight. I reach for my utility belt again, planning on using smoke bombs to make a getaway. When my fingers brush up against my waist instead, I have to chance a look to see why. This makes no sense. Not only are the compartments missing, but my entire belt is absent. Looking for something. I return my gaze to my new opponent to see them holding my belt. He tauntingly waves it around as he cackles in premature triumph. What are you gonna do now? There's no way he could have stolen my utility belt without me noticing. The only logical explanation is that it has something to do with his quirk. Even so, the ability to commit larceny won't be enough to stop me. I still have a few tricks up my sleeve. Literally, I keep spare bat-shaped shurikens concealed within my gauntlets just in case. I flick one open like a switchblade and pull back to pitch it like a ball. Again, he robs me blind. The batarang goes from my hand to his within the blink of an eye. Nice try. He snickers while inspecting its shape. Real cute. I understand now. His quirk allows him to instantly relocate an object from someone else's possession to his own. I saw it in action firsthand. It's an ability that allows him to commit perfect larceny. He drops the bat-shaped shuriken in order to inspect my belt. Let's see what other kind of toys you've got. And foolishly tries to open a compartment. It turns out that I didn't have to do anything. The security system takes care of him for me by hitting the thief with an electric shock of 30,000 volts. When he joins his much bigger friend on the floor, flopping like a fish from the shock, I approach the now neutralized threat. This is why you shouldn't take other people's things. And retrieve my utility belt. Let that be a life lesson for him and Eri. There's no erasing my presence here now, so I give up on stealth and sprint across the sand, not caring about the footprint indentions. All that matters is getting off the property before more of the Yakuza can intercept my escape route. I just have to make it to the tree line. A slim scarecrow stands in the way, the stitched smile of the burlap sack covering its head contradicting the noose hanging from its neck. I'm sure the getup has something to do with their quirk, but I don't allow myself to be apprehensive. I just brandish another batarang as I keep running and chuck it at the rope not binding their throat. I should have focused more on the odd size of its mouth instead. The stitches rip free and the scarecrow swallows the bat-shaped shuriken in one bite. There's a clack of its teeth coming together when its mouth snaps shut, those teeth grinning from its now exposed hole. Fine then, if it likes to eat, I'll throw it another treat. The second batarang gets devoured in one chomp as well. Except this time, that was planned. The second object I threw has a miniature explosive inside it. The blast will cost them a trip to the dentist and leaves more smoke rising from their mouth than a chain smoker. Now I've made it to the forest. I'm in the home stretch. I'm as good as gone. It'll also be easier to conceal myself with the trees as cover. The likelihood of being caught is slim. Or so I think. I shouldn't have allowed myself to get so cocky. Nothing good ever comes from being overconfident. I internally curse myself for being sloppy. I get a sudden rush of vertigo. It must be coming from a quirk. It's too powerful to be anything else. It's enough to bring me to my knees, the severe dizziness inhibiting my sense of balance. I can hardly think straight either. There's something fogging up my mind, like a mental block. Eri lifts her head up from being buried in my cape to see why I stopped moving. The look of concern tells me I must look as bad as I feel. BWA haha. A howling laughter comes from above. I look up and search the exposed branches not hidden by leaves, trying to find who's cackling. Feeling drunk, or yeah. Their words are slurred like they themselves are intoxicated. Like you, a hiccup interrupts their sentence. Can't stand up. Whoever is hiding in one of these trees must be the one responsible for whatever it is I'm feeling. Can't stand up dry-eyed. He elongates his speech pattern before laughing at his own absurdity. Same here, man. Then I spot him. He's hanging upside down from a short branch, legs all that's supporting him, like an acrobat. Which is why I ain't walking around down there. He swings back and forth while downing a bottle of booze. Better stay away from me, or you'll get just as plastered. Beer pours out from drains fitted into the eye holes of his otherwise plain mask. Alcohol not being consumed dripping down onto the dirt. Greasy long black hair flows down with the furry vest that hangs off his shoulders, exposing a malnourished but otherwise muscular bare chest. One look at him tells me that his quirk shares the effects of his more than buzzed state. He wields daggers in between his fingers, but staying down there makes you an easy target, man, proving that he knows how to use them by throwing them at me. I narrowly avoid being turned into a pin cushion, along with Eri, stumbling over myself and rolling back to my feet in this dazed state of mind. It's amazing that he has such good precision while being intoxicated. I don't want to test my own throwing skills when I'm seeing double though. Not being able to reach him from this position leaves me one other option. I hand Eri a pair of earplugs so that it won't affect her, put these in, and press the button on the device I've chosen. Once activated, it plays a sonic frequency that'll disrupt people's senses. It's meant to put them off balance, so it's amplified by my enemy's already dizzying quirk. He drops his bottle of beer first, the glass shattering and liquid spilling. Then he wails while also falling from the tree. His hands desperately try to plug his ears, but he won't have to worry about doing that for too long. Once he collides with the dirt, I press my boot into his head, making him a stepping stone. The launchpad helps me break back into a run, and the effects of his quirk dissipate now that he's out of commission. Hold on. Eri nuzzles my chest as I hold onto her a little more tightly. Once I'm sure that she's secure, I fire a grapple line into the wall so that we can ascend above it. She clings to me as we fly over the barrier between her captivity and her newfound freedom. I don't want her to miss the view though, so I expand my cape in order to glide. The little girl feels the wind against her face, her hair whipping in the cool breeze. She looks at the city ahead of her, the lights beckoning her from the darkness I pulled her out of. The moon is full and it envelopes the two of us. It burns brighter than the sun tonight. It glows for her. This wasn't done for Anarchy's sake. This was for her. I'm glad that I went out tonight and found her. Regardless of the circumstances, she can start to live her life now. When I return to the blood bank, it's with Eri. I consider taking her to the police instead. But I have no choice but to give in to Anarchy's demands. I don't want to exchange her for 𝗧𝗪𝗪, but I don't know what will happen to the former hero if I don't. I don't know what I'm expecting. Maybe I think Anarchy or Toga will show themselves in person for the trade-off. Perhaps it'll be another video recording. I only know that the tensions are as high as they were at the Yakuza's base. I put Eri down so that I can have better mobility, but not without first telling her, stay close. She nods her head and obeys, sticking to my side without actually physically doing so. As we venture through the rows of empty bottles and beakers, I notice a few vials do have a red liquid in them now. Not all the glasses are no longer filled. Eri has her head down, so I'm relieved that at least she doesn't seem to notice. I wonder whose blood is being preserved in those containers. A spike of anger flares up inside me at the thought of them torturing 𝗧𝗪𝗪. I still don't know what happened to 𝗬𝗧𝗪𝗪. That could be her DNA being stored. Despite Anarchy's grandeur and their supposed claims to fix society, they're working with Himiko Toga and they clearly have no qualms about the way she does things. When we reach the staff room, we reach the moment of truth. What lies beyond this door will determine what happens next. I wonder again if I'll find Anarchy themselves waiting for me on the other side. I tense up thinking that it could instead be Toga with a knife. I'm hopeful that there's a chance I'll find 𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗪. All I can do is dream. Now that I've been hit from behind, the back of my head yells at me to sleep, and my eyes agree with that screaming by shutting. My vision swims with splotches despite the darkness that calls out to me just as loud as where I was struck. Somebody snuck up on me from behind and rendered me unconscious. I'm passing out. Like the bat in my familiar nightmare, I've fallen once again. The bat is falling again. However, this time, not because its wings are damaged or broken. This time, it falls because its wings are bound. Unbreakable chains link around the tiny creature and restricts its movement. It doesn't flail or flap because it can't. It won't glide with a graceful landing, and it won't swoop back up to soar. It'll fall. It does fall. The bat plummets into the depth of darkness below it, swallowed by eternal abyss and eaten alive. The back of my head groans in protest upon waking up before I get the chance. A throbbing pulse makes me believe my heart has been replaced with where my brain is. It beats over and over, perhaps using my eardrums to do so. I was definitely hit over the head with a blunt object. It hurts to remember, but I think past the pain and recall that happening. Someone took me by surprise, not quite an ambush, but a sneak attack. I try to reach for the sore spot that marks where I was struck. But when I do, my arms don't quite reach. When I look to see why, I discover chain bonds confining me to a chair. I've been tied up and taken hostage. I know I've seen this before. Is it a concussion that's giving me a mental block? Oh, 𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗪, she was caught too. That's how I got into this situation to begin with. It all starts coming back to me now that I've remembered her. It started with the museum. Anarchy used it to make his grand debut. That's also where I discovered his accomplice, Himiko Toga, former member of the short-lived League of Villains. She had impersonated the pro-hero Ochako Uraraka, otherwise known as Uravity. When I pursued her, that's when I met 𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗪, the former member of the Wild Pussycats turned vigilante and wanted to enact vengeance on Toga. So we formed an alliance. The two of us interrogated one of Toga's original partners, Shuichi Agachi, another former member of the League of Villains. With the information extracted from him, we narrowed down a location. This blood bank. The plan was to go in together, but 𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗪 acted alone and got herself caught. By the time I had arrived, it was too late. Anarchy used her as blackmail to make me work for them. I had to save Eri from the Yakuza in order to exchange her for 𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪. Except, now here I am, I was betrayed and captured. I attempt to reach into a compartment on my utility belt, but my fingers twiddle in the air instead. My abductor must have removed it so that I wouldn't be able to use my gadgets to escape. I would try using the emergency tools that I keep stashed in my gauntlets, but those along with my gloves were taken away too. Realization strikes me harder than the blow I took to my head. Those weren't the only parts of my outfit which were stripped. My cape and cowl are gone too. That means my face is exposed. They know Batman is Izuku Midoriya. The modulated voice of Anarchy themselves confirms my biggest disturbing concern. Face to face with the one I've been hunting. With them knowing my identity and I not knowing theirs, I've got no words to respond with. There's no use denying what they're proven by unmasking me, and I have no advantage to counter with. The tall stature of the crimson-cloaked figure is a lot more wobbly in person. They walk like the fabled crooked man, no wonder they need a cane. I didn't expect Batman to be quirkless, and they sound just as contorted, defeated and angry. I can't resist the bitterness in my bite when I snap, disappointed. Not at all. But I'm not expecting the gleeful sincerity that meets my hostility. Even when their voice is filtered with its pitch adjusted and their expression hidden by a golden faceplate, I can tell that they're smiling. If anyone would have an appreciation for what I'm trying to do, it would be you. In a society where quirks determine your standing much like financial class, you who's quirkless should understand. They genuinely believe I'll be a sympathizer for their cause. Aren't you forgetting? I'm rich, so I give them a reminder that I'm not 100% willing to be on board. I'm also trying to stall them while I dislocate my elbows in order to break free. The mechanical laugh is as fake as it sounds. Aren't you forgetting? It was your father, who had a quirk I might add, that left you that wealth. I have to bite down on my tongue to keep myself from cursing at them for daring to speak of my deceased parents that way. I can't give them any more power in this situation by having an emotional outburst. The downside is that they take my silence as a sign to continue. I meant what I said. You should join me. Imagine what we could accomplish together. I shake my head in denial. I'm not convinced that our goals align. You work with a sociopath. You Anarchy bends forward abruptly, leaning into my face. I did what? They snap in a fit of rage like a child that was just told no. They're quick to regain their footing though, both physically with their cane and mentally. Did I or she kill anyone? Have we committed any crimes you haven't? They're referring to breaking and entering, comparing crashing the museum with my infiltration of the Yakuza base. They're claiming we're both vigilantes who conceal our identities. They're wagering that I won't say I've never blackmailed anyone. I could bring up the point that I work alone as well, but I know there's no point in arguing. Most of what I could say will probably be met by some pre-calculated response. So instead of turning them down for the reason they expect, I say, it's not what you've done. It's what you're planning to do. Anarchy cranes backward, standing up straight and nearly touching the ceiling. Why do you insist on being so stubborn? They huff in disbelief. They're silent for a moment, making me think that I've stumped them with an unexpected response. But then they stamp their cane on the ground with an authority akin to that of a judge slamming their gavel. Fine. I'll tell you what I have planned. I plan to purge this world of quirks. The statement makes me stop struggling against my restraints. It's too shocking to believe. When I look up, my expression must tell more than I can say, because Anarchy elaborates almost immediately. Think about it. Without quirks, there would be no heroes or villains. Without quirks, there would be no bias or prejudice. Without quirks, the world would be a better place. The chains wrapped around my body suddenly feel a lot tighter. I don't think about the morality of it. I don't even consider my personal feelings. All that crosses my mind is Eri and how the Yakuza was using her to make quirk-destroying bullets. It clicks together like two puzzle pieces. Anarchy didn't care about me saving Eri. Anarchy just wanted to have her for themselves to use. Eri must have a quirk that erases other quirks, and Anarchy is planning on using her against her will the same way the Yakuza did. The entire conversation, I was slipping through the metal bindings. If I were an escape artist, I'd be given an applause. My arms are the work of a contortionist, dislocating and relocating to get free. The timing works out that I manage to get loose now. So I give Anarchy my answer. Actions speak louder than words. I kick the cane out from under them, snapping it like a twig. The sudden loss of their crutch makes them trip and fall, right into an uppercut. The punch knocks their mask and hat off, both landing on opposite ends of the room. They themselves land flat on their back, facing the ceiling. When I stand up, I'm the one who's towering over them now. Before I can get closer to see their face though, the door suddenly swings open. I raise my arms in a defensive stance, expecting Toga. When I turn around to confront her, it's not who I think. I make the mistake of lowering that guard once I see it's 𝗧𝗪𝗪 instead. She lands a kick to my sternum, making my chest erupt like a volcano with heat as hot as lava. The pain from my previous injury that Killer Croc gave me still fresh there. I reel from the ache and barely block the next foot that's aimed for my head. She's not just attacking me, she's doing so aggressively. What are you doing? I ask the first of a million questions while sidestepping a palm strike. The real question is, she breathlessly takes out the back of one of my knees before bringing an elbow down on my wounded shoulder. What are you doing? She's fighting dirty. She remembers just what places to hit. I came here to rescue you. I shout back with the unspoken question as to how she escaped on her own. Unless she didn't have to escape. I start considering the possibility the reason she's so viciously attacking me is because she's working with Anarchy too. Funny way of showing it. She goes for my right side next. Just as predicted, I was purposely favoring my left side so that she'd target me there. I catch her by the wrist and use all of my strength to lift her over my head. Then I toss her into the wall opposite to Anarchy. You have a funny way of showing gratitude. I fire back with my own retort before asking, why are you defending Anarchy? I get my answer before she tells me. When I look back at Anarchy, I finally see their face. It suddenly makes sense now. The reason they misspelled their name. The reason they were struggling to stand and needed a cane was because they were using stilts. The reason they're brash and arrogant as they are naive with their temper tantrums is because they're just a kid. A boy no older than 13 refers to 𝗧𝗪𝗪 by her first name, Tomoko. Tone laced with worry now that it isn't disguised or deepened. Kota Izumi rushes over to 𝗧𝗪𝗪, concerned about her well-being. It makes sense why she switched sides now, considering he was the whole reason she wanted to pursue Toga in the first place. They fuss about one another taking hits from me, each babying the other. It appears he's alive and well. It's just what the League of Villains may have filled his head with to make him become Anarchy that worries me. And whether or not 𝗧𝗪𝗪 will be too persuaded by her emotions to fight him in the worst-case scenario. I didn't know. I let her know that I wouldn't have attacked him otherwise. I would have showed more restraint and pulled my punch, not because of who he is to her, but because he's just a child. I stare at my bruised knuckles, the same ones that beat on criminals just hit a kid. Izumi wipes oozing blood from a split in his lip, from where I struck him. But you knew my plan. He accuses, you knew my intentions and still chose violence. I glance at 𝗧𝗪𝗪, our eyes crossing briefly before she looks away. I wonder if she even knows what his plan is too. I lay all my cards on the table and make my own accusation. I know that it involves Eri. I know it means doing something unethical to her, making you no better than the Yakuza. Almost as though on cue, Eri happens to enter the room at that very moment, joined by Himiko Toga. Both of them have their hair braided into pigtails. Toga's dyed blue and red on either end while Eri's is a pure snow white having been washed. Eri's bandages have been changed and redressed with pink wraps that match a pair of clean pajamas to replace the hospital gown she used to wear. She looks confused by what's transpiring in the room, but happy nonetheless. My claim has no basis when looking at her now. What we miss. Toga sways back and forth on the soles of her feet with more childish energy than either of the actual children in the room. The crazy blonde is completely oblivious to the mood, unable to read the room. I think there's been a misunderstanding. 𝗧𝗪𝗪 helps Izumi to his feet before turning to face me. Remember, we fought each other at first too before realizing we're on the same side. I want to tell her the circumstances are different. She went to a hero school and earned a license before losing her quirk and turning to vigilantism. She's not a former murderer, rehabilitated or not. Toga cleans her fangs with a knife, using it like a toothpick. I look at Izumi, the boy who was taken by villains and never returned. I want to tell her she's nothing like them. I know it'll fall upon deaf ears though. She won't be willing to hear me out. Even if she were, this is hardly the place or the time to try. Eri is too close to Toga for comfort and Izumi is unpredictable. All I can do is nod and hope that an opportunity presents itself later. I've explained myself plenty. Izumi spits the blood between his lips. Then he smooths back his spiky black hair with a hand, holding it there. I can tell you've got some qualms still regardless. He releases the hair in his grip like he's letting go of a stressful sigh. So I'll give you some time to think it over. Consider what I've said and make a decision later. 𝗧𝗪𝗪 glances between me and Izumi before agreeing with that verdict. Just think about it. She pleads with eyes that practically beg. I don't want to leave her and Eri here with them. I don't want to walk away and let them go. The alternative is joining them though, and I'm not willing to do that either. I don't have much of a choice but to say, I'll mull it over. When I turn to go, Izumi calls out to me one last time. He's picking up the golden face mask as he shouts, but don't take too long. I pause and look back to see him place it over his face. I'd like to have an answer before this year's Hero Festival. The manor feels colder than the cave beneath it. The lack of bats hanging from stalactites makes the place seem a lot lonelier. The fireplace beneath the mantel is unlit, an old family photo of me between my parents consumed by the frigid shadows. The house is a haunting reminder of what I've lost and what I've become. Now that I've shed my body armor, I feel naked and exposed to the cold bite of the harsh environment. Anarchy's offer sends chills down my spine. I question myself whether or not he's right. I look to the picture of my mother and father, silently asking them to give me an answer. I want them to decide for me. They don't say anything though. They just continue to stare down at me, waiting for me to tell them what I think. The time Anarchy gave me to decide just keeps ticking away in the back of my mind. I place my hand there, feeling where I was struck in the head. My thoughts are overflowing to the point that I think it's about to explode. A world without quirks. I try to imagine what that would be like. There was a time like that at one point. The only heroes and villains prowling the night and flying over the city in costumes were the ones in manga or anime. There was no such thing as superpowers. Staring up at my parents, my eyes find their way down to myself. There was still crime though. special abilities or not, criminals still existed. The only ones able to stop them were the police. The person who killed my parents did so without a quirk. The cops weren't there to stop them that night either. Without quirks, we find other means to wield power. There was still guns. A world without quirks wouldn't prevent a child from losing their parents again. After all, I do what I do without a quirk. A world without quirks might level the playing field for me, but it would mean truly waging this war alone. Heroes rely on their powers to save the day. Without their powers, they wouldn't put themselves out there. The police rely on their quirks now to solve cases too. More criminals would get away uncaught. That means more guns aimed at families and back alleys. I slide my hand from the back of my head to the front of my face, rubbing the bridge of my nose. Rough, calloused hands tell of a less than easy life. A life robbed from me that night. Murder, stealing. It's naive for me to think I can stop it by myself as much as it is naive to think it'd stop by simply getting rid of quirks. That's not what I'm doing though. I don't think it's ever going to end. I won't one day defeat the ultimate evil. So what am I doing this for then? If what I'm doing doesn't mean it'll make a difference after I'm dead, then why don't I just hang up the cape and cowl? I think the answer is because I'm here now. I survived that night and I'm here now. So I'll fight for now while I can. The sound of an old wooden floorboard creaking snaps me out of my deep rumination. When I turn around to see who misstepped, I'm only briefly surprised to see Melissa's shield before remembering the night we spent together. Her face flushes red with embarrassment upon being caught and she shyly avoids making eye contact. I face the mantle again, giving her the privacy she feels that she needs. I saw you weren't in the bed when I woke up, so. But I can still hear her from behind me. I had a nightmare. The excuse comes naturally since it's not entirely a lie. Staring at the mantle where the picture of my mother and father hangs, it feels like I'm reliving that nightmare right this moment anyways. I look away from it, facing her again to put on a brave face. It's nothing for you to worry about. You can go back to sleep if you want. But she shakes her head and steps further into the room instead of leaving. I'm used to waking up at this time anyways. Her attempt to assure me is a reminder that America and Japan have different time zones. She gets close enough to see the expression I was making as fake. She's able to tell even without her glasses on. Seeing my current state, she asks, "Do you want to talk about it?" Part of me wishes I could tell her. I think she would have a valuable opinion when it comes to making the choice I've been given since she's quirkless too. I know I can't though. I can't tell her what's troubling me with the hopes of her understanding, because even she wouldn't. It's about more than being quirkless. It's about being helpless. Like Kaken said, it's about how useless I am and what amount of worth I have. It's about whether or not my crusade really matters anymore. No, I look away from her so she can't see my distraught expression for any longer. I'm caught between the photo of my parents and I or her, unable to meet the gaze of either. Feeling the cold wrapping itself around me, substituting the cape I'd grown accustomed to wearing. I lean away from her warm touch when she tries to hug me. She looks hurt that I'd done so, and so I have to ask, "Why do you care?" She makes a sound, something like a cross between a huff and short-lived laugh. Whatever dry humor was there quickly evaporates. "What is it about you that makes me care?" She repeats the question more seriously, but gives a sarcastic answer. "Your boyism charm. Your hot bod. The tons of money." Her eyes flick from my abdominals to the craftsmanship of the manor. I can hear the hurt in her voice as clear as I can see it in her expression. If only I were that shallow. I wait for her to continue and give me her honest answer then. When she sees that I won't interrupt and that I'm willing to listen, she does. "There's something hidden in you. Something deeper." I watch her eyes move from my present self to the child in the picture behind me. It's not hard to imagine why you're out to save the world even without a quirk like All Might's. The question is, when will you let someone rescue you? I hang my head, knowing what lies below waiting for me. There's nobody who can pull me up from the depths of that cave. I can feel it through the soles of my shoes, the beating of over 1,000 wings. Just below the ground, they beckon, untamed and circling in pitch-black darkness like sharks in the depths of an ocean. Their screeches are cries of my name. I don't need saving. The bats convinced me of that. I don't tell her that there's nobody left for her to save. I don't say the boy in the picture behind me never grew up. I don't let her know what's standing in front of her is something else. I don't say what I've become is what does the saving of others. What I say instead is, I think it's best if you go back to Island, so that she doesn't figure it out for herself. The hurt in her expression is more evident than it was before, the absence of light doing nothing to hide it. "Do you really mean that?" She strains to see my pain through the dark though. I still do my best to conceal it by refusing to look at her. Yes, I do. But my heart half breaks at how easy it is to lie to her regardless of if she can see it. Okay, it breaks all the way when she believes me without question. I understand. I only look at her again when she's walking away. I watch as her back recedes into the distance and out the door. It must be because my heart is broken, but I'm relieved when she doesn't look back. Kurogiri enters from where she left a moment later, glancing in the direction she had gone in. He sounds impartial when he asks, "Why did you tell her to leave?" But I know he's dismayed by my choice. She deserves better than me. I know he'll make some kind of retort if I don't elaborate. She deserves to live a happy life with a family. The picture behind me is an example of that. That life is what was taken from me. That life is what I fight to protect and preserve for others. For her, I can't give her that. And Kurogiri knows the reason why just as well as I do. Can't or won't. He must be asking it rhetorically since he's quick to alleviate the mood with a quip. You could have allowed her to stay for breakfast. At the very least. It works. Some of the stress in my system leaves with the tension in my shoulders. Hearing Kurogiri return to his regular witty self. Breakfast can wait. I don't want to skip morning training. I walk past him as I head for the weights room. One of the perks of being rich is having a home gym. Don't get too immersed. Kurogiri calls after me. When I don't stop, he pursues and follows me from behind. Before we stray too far from the topic of women in your life, you happen to have an appointment scheduled for Miss Jiru's talk show this evening. That had completely slipped my mind with all else that was going on. I hummed to let Kurogiri know I heard him, grateful for the reminder. I'm sure he's taken care of all the proper accommodations already, so I don't bother prying for more information. Will you provide the transportation this time? I do poke fun at him a little though. He doesn't laugh or jest back, perhaps feeling mildly guilty. He probably figures he could have at least been on comms for me. He pretends to act unfazed while asking, "Come to think of it, how did your nightly endeavor turn out?" He'll probably think I don't want to answer out of spite, but I'm not in the mood to discuss the turnout. All I can do is sigh to let him know the bare minimum, that there's nothing good to report, and walk a little more briskly to put space between us. Let's see how this one goes first, is what I leave him with. Water threads stretch from the heavens to the earth, woven into the ether between those two places. The asphalt of the road unhardens, splashing as tires run over it. Those translucent strings create a sea of waves, flooding the streets. Hell isn't a place of fire and brimstone. It's a wet world that'll drown you. I'm protected from the downpour by a rounded bullet-resistant glass canopy. But I have a complete 360-degree view of the typhoon just outside. I see just how dirty the world is. No amount of rain can wash it away. The water bends and gives way to me as I dive deep, the car submerging itself as though it were a submarine instead. The vehicle I'm in is a one-of-the-kind wonder. From the carbon fiber armored hull to its custom-built fuel-injected engine, its sleek frame runs low to the ground, but has the proper hydraulics installed that would enable the car to rise up at the flip of a single toggle switch. The growl of the engine is almost imperceptible as buildings whiz by. Kurogiri could have just provided instantaneous transportation with his warp gates. But then the black iron monster rounding corners wouldn't be around to remind people that I'm out here. Also, as grim as it is, I need to see the city for what it truly is. I can't do that if I take shortcuts. You never know what might cross your path along the way either. I steel myself, remembering to not just focus on what's in front of the steering wheel as I drive. There's a reason for this outing. There's a destination for where I'm heading. Kajiro Okuda, formerly known as Jiren, now goes by a different nickname, the Penguin. No matter what codename he goes by, the one thing that hasn't changed is that he's an information broker frequently used by the criminal underworld here in Japan, which means he's the one I need to talk to if I want to know more about Izumi's plan as Anarchy. The pieces of the puzzle are there, the festival date he gave me to make a decision by and his intention to be rid of quirks. But it's a matter of putting them together to figure out how. That's the hard part. Was I right in my assumption that he'll use Eri, or is there something more to it? Penguin ought to know the answer to that question. The likelihood of their affiliation is considerably high. Before he became Penguin, Jiren was a scout for the League of Villains. Having been acquainted with each other during that time, Toga could have returned to him for his services. It's an exploitable lead in my self-inflicted investigation that won't arouse suspicion from them if approached properly. I think back to my interview with Earphone Jack prior to now. Jiru had asked me if I believe stepping into the limelight is the only way to make a difference. I had answered yes as Izuku Midoriya, but the answer I would have liked to have given is no. Not everyone needs to be an All Might or a Lemillion. Not everyone can save the lives of a million people with a smile on their face. If you can save just one person, a single child, that's enough. I need to know if Eri still needs saving. Penguin's casino juts out from the wet-washed road like a glacier in the sea. As I drive towards it, I feel like I'm sailing the Titanic towards an iceberg. Blue spotlights flicker and flash more than a gaming house in Las Vegas. The lounge with its Arctic design is better suited for this stone ocean as opposed to Sin City's desert. Bats don't swim. They normally take to the sky. Tonight, though, I stay grounded. I take the back alley where drunks, cheats, and losers are thrown out. The door there is latched and bolted unless otherwise opened from the inside. I don't let that stop me, though. I produce a tube of hydrofluoric acid from one of my belt compartments. It's a solution of hydrogen fluoride in water, a precursor to all fluorine compounds. The colorless solution is highly corrosive and dissolves the lock on the door so that I can get in. As I stride through the angular gloom of the maintenance halls, I pass a woman holding a cigarette lighter. She stops before sparking it to flame, having me believe that smoking is forbidden back here. The stale scent in the air tells a different story. Upstairs, the smoke is more expensive. The music is softer and laced with the click of poker chips. The whizzing spin of hypnotic wheels increases. It's a gambler's paradise. I ignore the card games and brush past the bar. My business is in the office that overlooks it all. When I finally find the Iceberg Lounge's owner, it's no wonder why his nickname was changed from Durin to Penguin. All the money and power must have turned him into a glutton, the blubber of his body not blending well with the unfitted tux he's wearing. His great hair is parted to one side, bangs hanging above his eyes, a monocle on that same side. I notice he's missing fingers, one hand holding a cigar with only 3, giving the appendage the appearance of a flipper. Hell, he must not be fond of my appearance either. I notice the gap between his teeth when he speaks, noting it's not a natural one. Don't lie to me. I narrow my gaze as the lens in my mask displays a heart rate monitor of the stout man in front of me. I'll know. His pulse is high, his nerves on fire. But I'll be able to tell whether or not he gives me the truth with this form of lie detection. Have you had any recent dealings with Himiko Toga or a client associated with her? I take a step closer to give him a more intimidating incentive to answer the question. He swallows hard, hopefully whatever lie he considered telling. Well, aren't you a scary one? He sizes me up as a bead of sweat rolls down his forehead. The rhetorical question goes unanswered. But I still wait on him to answer mine. I have a lot of people coming in and out of here. It's hard to remember every single one of them. He tries to be elusive by feigning ignorance. Not liking that answer, I grab the hand holding the cigar and break it. I ignore his suffering squawking and hoist him up by the collar of his penguin suit. Let me jog your memory. My fist cocks back so that it's primed to punch him if he dares to defy me again. No, he wheezes while cradling his hand. I've seen your act. I ain't done nothing you ain't done. 𝗀𝐻𝐽𝐽 shakes his head like that'll get rid of the doubt of his own words. As a matter of fact, I've done worse. Word on the street says you don't kill. I pull him closer, so close that our noses practically touch. But I know pain. I repeat with emphasis so he gets the message. I know pain. The grip I have on his collar tightens, my knuckles against his throat. Sometimes I share it. With someone like you. He glances down at his broken hand and then back up at me before I feel him swallow. I've been tortured before. My fist connects with his nose so hard that it leaves a lasting point. You bashed odd. The broken schnoz impairs his ability to talk but not the ability to ooze blood from its nostrils. That's fine. I don't need him to talk if he's not going to tell me what I want to know. I'm sure that he keeps records in his office. If so, those files should give me the information I'm seeking. I won't need him anymore if that's the case. Be quiet or your other hand is next. My threat shuts him up long enough for me to sit him in the corner for a timeout. He's too focused on nursing his nose and holding his limp hand to be concerned with me rummaging through his belongings. I eventually find a folder with the anarchist monogram consisting of a capital letter A surrounded by the capital letter O. It's my presumption that the symbol is meant to mark Izumi's Anarchy file. When I flip it open, I find a map of the parade path in the upcoming Hero Festival. There's bank transactions and purchases made on receipts, the items censored by whiteout. A floor plan of the All Might Museum, stolen blueprints, gives me a look at how he pulled off his first scheme. You can't rifle through my stuff. I hear 𝗀𝐻𝐽𝐽 complain and protest to my digging from his place on the floor. That's private property. I'll sue. I close the folder, but don't put it back. I'm taking it with me. I don't bother acknowledging Penguin with a glance as I walk past him, but I do respond to his prior statement. Then call a cop. I'm sure they'd love to do a thorough investigation of the casino. He crows in outrage. Don't expect me to forget this. Loud enough to be heard from outside his office. The threat doesn't concern me though. Bats have nothing to fear from flightless birds. Authors note it's always sad boy hours here. Guest. However, I'm not exactly trying to erase Izuku's personality with Bruce's by making him a Batman replica ripoff. I'm more so putting Izuku in Bruce's shoes to capture what he would do in such a similar situation. While Izuku has his moments of badassery in canon, he's also pretty emotional of a crybaby, so I don't think it's too far-fetched to have him feel sorry for himself here and there. As for Kurogiri being meshed with Alfred, I just love those characters too much to get rid of him so easily. Though that is possible at some point considering Kurogiri in canon and how that could affect the story later on. Every time that I'm reminded of my own company, it's always during broad daylight. The headquarters of the large corporation is a shining steel tower, a gleaming monument comparable to the architecture of hero agencies. Except, this is not a hero agency. This is just a metaphorical pillar that supports the heroes. Support equipment and other hero-related gear comes out of this building. Licensed heroes aren't the only ones that receive those tools though. As a matter of fact, I have custom commissions made for myself. That's why I'm here, to conduct business. Of course, today is the same day I attend a main board of directors meeting in a glass-enclosed boardroom, but that's simply an alibi. I'll admit that I have no difficulty pretending a certain lack of interest at each meeting, but I watch my board far more closely than they realize outside of these gatherings. They would be surprised to learn how much I already know about them and what they've done for my company. I've cultivated my public persona as a dashing playboy, the rich heir who loves cocktail parties, beautiful women, and the nightlife. I flaunt my riches, all the while being generous to the point of childlike innocence. Unfortunately, though the disguise successfully keeps people from putting Izuku Midoriya and Batman in the same sentence, it also gives me an air of incompetence in the eyes of the directors. Though I'm a chairman of the board and the sole heir to my father's vast fortune, the other directors often take it upon themselves to keep me sheltered from the day-to-day business that transpires here. As such, I too keep myself at arm's length from becoming involved with the affairs of business unless otherwise deemed necessary. So I don't bother being punctual with my tardy entrance. My apologies for being late. This is rather early in the day for me. I don't even have to fake being bleary-eyed, having stayed up all night reading the contents of Penguin's file on Anarchy. Most of them will consider me hungover, hiding their snickers behind hand-covered phony coughs. They will assume they have the time and freedom to run the company as they so please. I'll always be secretly watching them, though. That is the one thing I can do for my parents as Izuku Midoriya, and not Batman. This company is still mine. The directors will be reminded of that when the time is right, but can have their control for now. But it's past noon. I'm admittedly surprised to see Momo Yaoyorozu seated at the table, though. It had completely slipped my mind that she had joined the team of investors after my appearance on Earphone Jack's talk show. In order to feign embarrassment, I purposely yet discreetly catch the toe of my shoe on the fringed edge of the area rug used as a doormat. I stumble, catch my balance, and act sheepish as I rub the nape of my neck. I keep late hours. The excuse comes as natural as the habit of keeping my shoulders somewhat slumped to diminish my physical size. One of the board members, Akatsuka 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿, occasionally casts a sharp glance at me. I pretend to ignore her but quickly pick up on the mood of simmering anger and discomfort. Her disappointment is palpable. It's abundantly clear that she doesn't approve of my aloof playboy behavior. In order to pacify her and keep the peace, I take a seat without another word added to my performance. Goro Shijno, another director, clears his throat to shift everyone's attention to him. I suppose we can shift the topic now that Mr. Midoriya has joined us. His gaze slowly sweeps over his fellow directors before returning to me. We're very pleased that you've decided to devote your energies to charity work. Not only does it put the best public face on all of our activities, it's also closely in line with what your father would have wanted. Mr. Shijno sounds sincere, but I know that most of the directors actually look upon my charity work and extravagant society functions or huge donations as a ball and chain. Despite the tax deductions, unnecessary expenditures that could have been used to build new factories or provide bonuses to management are considered a nuisance. Nevertheless, the directors continue to allow me to manage my charities without complaint, as if they're throwing me a bone. I'll expect to see some of you attend a charity gala one of these days too. I take a verbal jab at them before turning it into a flippant suggestion. Draw straws if you have to. You know you have our full support for your humanitarian activities. Shijno says in an irritatingly sycophantic tone to mollify me. In any case, you are the best spokesman for the company, Mr. Midoriya. I suppose I am. I lift my chin like the praise is going to my head. And it's a full-time job. That makes for my cue to summon a reason for slipping away just as quickly as I had arrived. Speaking of which, I have matters to attend to in my office. You know where to find it if you need me. I say, knowing full well that none of them would actually bother to do so, unless there's something else you wish to discuss. No, that should conclude everything on your part, Shijno says, despite me not having actually contributed anything to the meeting. He and everyone else are just happy to get rid of me. We'll notify you if anything else comes up, he adds as an afterthought. By email, 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿 makes a snide remark before quickly covering it up with an excuse as not to disturb you in your office. I stand up from my seat with a hum and a nod. You've got a point. I should give you a raise. And try not to laugh at the humor of humoring her. She buys the act completely. Her smug smile tells me that she's pleased with herself for thinking that she got one over on me. To toy with her some more, I turn my gaze to Yaoyorozu. Oh, and thank you for making this boardroom much more decorative. It needed a flower as beautiful as you are. Yaoyorozu's blush goes from pink to red when I add a wink as a period placement. I doubt 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿's red face is for the same reason though. Once I'm finished there, I make my exit. The elevator that brought me up the tower waits to bring me down to what's beneath. A basement reinforced with metallic alloy akin to the Yakuza's underground base makes up the development studio where support equipment and products alike are created. the one to thank for such inventions, currently occupies said space. Her salmon dreadlocks are tied into a ponytail so they don't get in the way. Having grown beyond shoulder length and reached her waist, I had suggested she get it cut, but that would require her actually leaving the development studio for once. A thick welding mask covers her face, but I'm sure it's covered in grease and who knows what else, considering she hasn't left here to shower either. I notice her workshop overalls are tied around her midsection, leaving nothing protective other than a black tank top to stop the sparks from burning her. I know you're trying to look as fatigued as I do, but do you really have to go adding the same amount of burns and scars? I raise my voice to be heard over the blowtorch so that she can become aware of my presence. She can get quite absorbed with her work, so I doubt she would have noticed my arrival at all had I not done so. 𝗵𝗃, inventor extraordinaire, stops welding momentarily to lift up her face mask. I do if it means I'll look as hot as you do with them. The crosshairs within her eyes zoom in to get a better look at my physique thanks to her quirk. She's as shameless as I am, but it has a more teasing nature than flirtatious, I've discovered. When I had first met her, I quickly learned that she's simply oblivious to social cues with no filter to channel her thoughts through her mouth. 𝗵𝗃 is just an assertive kind of woman. You need to wear your protective gear. I drop the playfulness to fix her with a serious stare nonetheless. She knocks on the welding mask fixed to her head like it's a helmet, 𝐼𝐴𝐵, before taking it off and setting it down on her workstation beside the blowtorch. There's some sort of contraption there too, the trinket that she's building. I'm serious. I return my gaze to her so she can find meaning in those words. Take a break every once in a while. Shower, get cleaned up, eat something. She's close enough that I can place a hand on her shoulder to let her know that I care about her well-being. Take care of yourself so you don't get overworked. She returns the touch with her own, placing a hand against my chest. Though we did sleep together before, hence how she knows about my scars, I know it's meant to be more assuring than affectionate. You know my babies come first. 𝗵𝗃 gives me a soft push before returning to the inventions she insists on calling her children. I sigh, knowing full well and understanding that from a certain point of view, I'd be just like her, consumed by my mission deep underground, if it weren't for 𝗂𝐴𝐺. Just try and get some rest for a few hours. I know that such suggestions go unconsidered by people like us. Yeah. She rolls her eyes before grabbing a wrench and proceeding to work some more anyways. So are you here just to check up on me, or do you want me to try making another baby for you? I nearly choke on my own saliva. Even knowing the word baby translates to invention, phrases like that still make me do a double take. I thought we had a pregnancy scare the first time she dropped a sentence like that on me. Shaking my head to clear out those thoughts, I was thinking about something that'll allow people to see through various buildings at once, and share with her the real reason for my visit. X-ray vision. We already did that. She doesn't bother glancing up as she dismisses the idea. Not quite. I was thinking something more along the lines of sonar vision. But that changes as soon as I correct her. 𝗵𝗃 enters my personal space. Her breasts pressed against my chest, fast enough to make me believe she has an unregistered teleportation quirk. Echolocation, like a bat, she excitedly exclaims as she starts to catch on and consider the concept. Not wanting her to possibly put two and two together, considering I take these inventions for myself, I present her with an alternative comparison, or a submarine. Maybe a little hastily, but she doesn't seem to notice nor care. Yes, that'd make for a beautiful baby. She launches into action as though I gave her a shot of adrenaline. You're talking about solving the problem of a limited field of vision X-ray has. It's frightening how little all of my life training allows me to keep track of the way she zooms about the studio. I know that she'll make me proud though. She always delivers. The idea came about last night while I was going over Penguin's file on Anarchy. The parade path planned on a map gave no clue as to where on that path Izumi and Toga would strike. My solution was that if need be, when the time comes, I'd be able to see into all the buildings on that path at once. That way they wouldn't be able to hide from me and I'd be able to interfere. I managed to stop 𝗵𝗃's trajectory when she attempts to shoot by me again. With her caught in my arms, she looks up at me in confusion. There's no need to be forceful. Instead, I tenderly hold her in place. Rest first, just for a few hours. I mean it. My tone isn't commanding, but it seems to work. She places a hand on my cheek, being just as tender as I am with her. Fine, you're the boss. And I can't help but get lost in the yellow glow of her eyes. The crosshairs lock onto my gaze, fixing themselves there like a scope selecting its target. Even covered in grime, she's beautiful. I'm not interrupting anything, am I? The quiet moment shared between 𝗵𝗃 and I is broken by a voice that doesn't belong to either of us. When I see a familiar head of green like my own, 𝗬𝗏𝗏, I jump in surprise. The direction I go in just so happens to be away from 𝗵𝗃, separating us from one another. 𝗬𝗏𝗏. I lock eyes with her and realize just how similar a shade of yellow hers are with 𝗵𝗃's. What are you doing here? 𝗬𝗏𝗏 tilts her head in confusion, returning my stare as though she's perplexed by the question. Then, as though the answer is obvious, she has the nerve to laugh. I came to see you. She trots over with an aura of innocence that doesn't quite show through her eyes. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 meets her halfway with that same outer presence of purity, wrapping her in a hug that lets the other girl know she doesn't know a thing about personal boundaries. Hi, I'm 𝗵𝗲. The two separate, but the inventor still stays within arm's length even then. You must be Izukun's girlfriend. That's the second time today 𝗧𝗵's almost made me choke to death on my own spit. I barely blurt out, girlfriend, as I wheeze and cough, unable to get any more words out to dispute the misunderstanding. I look to 𝗧𝗏𝗘 for help. Clearly that was a mistake, judging by the mischievous smirk she has on her face. Izukan, what she took away from that sentence and the question she has about it clearly isn't the same concern as mine. The crosshairs in 𝗧𝗵's gaze flicks between the two of us as she tries to read our opposing energies. She hasn't always been the best at reading between the lines or interpreting people's social cues, so I'm grateful when she asks, oh, did I assume wrong? But 𝗧𝗏𝗘 beats me to the punch when answering her, not at all. That answer more shocking to me than it is to 𝗧𝗵. Izukan, that's pretty good. She's enjoying this immensely as she tries to rein in her giggle fits. Mind if I steal that? All right, that's enough. I cut in between them, taking 𝗧𝗏𝗘 by the arm and leading her away as I glance at 𝗧𝗵 over my shoulder. Excuse us for a second. I'm aware of how desultory I sound without an excuse or a reason, but I'm grateful knowing that it won't bother 𝗧𝗵 of all people. She doesn't need to know nor need to be involved with 𝗧𝗏𝗘. So I keep my voice to a hoarse but hushed whisper once we get far enough away to ask, why are you really here? The fellow brunette bats her eyelashes. They told me that I'd find you in your office. I guess I shouldn't be surprised to find you down here. Batman's office would be underground like in a cave, right? But I'm in no mood for her goading or teasing. I don't dignify her with a response. I fix her with a glare, one that I hope is as effective without the cowl. I don't release my hold on her, nor do I look away until she gives me an actual answer. Sulking, her expression becoming a mow, she surrenders. Okay, fine. But then I see the light in her eyes diminish and I realize it's a mask to hide her actual feelings. She has something serious to tell me. Otherwise, she wouldn't have bothered to come here. I let go of her arm and wait for her to tell me, I'm here to warn you. Warn me. I wouldn't be so intrigued if it weren't for how serious she sounds. Her expression matches her tone now as she explains. Penguin told Toga about your little visit to his casino. She told Kota and Izumi told you. But I don't need to wait to hear the rest to understand. So what? His offer is off the table now. It's my assumption that Izumi believes I went behind his back, and 𝗧𝗏𝗘 only confirms those suspicions when she says, I'm trying to convince him to reconsider, but he wasn't very happy. I nod my head to let her know I understand the situation. But even so, I still don't understand why she came here to tell me. I look her in the eyes, wanting to ask what her personal motivation is. I want to know why she sought me out. But instead, I ask, so what's the warning? Penguin hired some assassins. They're coming after you. She breaks eye contact as she murmurs, I just thought I'd let you know to lay low for a while. It's like she can read my mind. I only feel more of an obligation to ask her why she cares to give me a warning now. It's like she's hiding the answer in plain sight. But I don't give in to the allure. It's better that I distance myself. It's better that I take a step back and stand tall. It's better that I continue to glare. We both know I won't do that. It's better that I remember we're on opposite sides. Yeah, she solemnly agrees with a lowered head. When she looks back up, she has an asymmetrical smile. Her yellow eyes have lost their shine completely. I suppose you're right. And I know that she's as somber as I am about the reality of it all. Help me. It comes out of my mouth before I comprehend what it is that I'm saying. 𝗧𝗏𝗘 looks just as startled as I do by the abruptness of it. I try figuring out what it is that I mean before she can. Am I asking her to help me with the mercenaries? Or am I asking her to fill the hole in my heart? I settle on, help me bring Izumi to his senses. She stares at me in confusion, no, with curiosity. We hold each other's gaze and it makes me believe she may actually help me. But then her asymmetric smile returns. It's faker than all of the fraudulent ones I've used. She says one last thing to me before she turns to leave. Sorry, Bat. And then I watch her walk away. I stand there pondering why she looked so sad. I wonder why she came all the way here just to warn me. Is it something to do with her conscience? Or could it be something else? I stand there mulling it over for a while. Whenever I feel like I'm on the brink of an answer, there's a thought that prevents me from thinking rationally. 𝗧𝗵 comes up from behind me to say it for me. I like her. All I can do is sigh and begrudgingly agree with her. I wish I couldn't say the same.